Welcome, everyone. This is AllMinusOne. I'm Bill, and today with me we have the lovely Holly from up in Canadian and of the YouTube channel Holly Midlife. You can find her link in the description if you guys want to check her out. So we brought Holly on, or I did, because, well, I wanted to talk about this trucker convoy stuff, and I figured who better than from a based Canadian. So.
Yes, yes, it's a proud Honkastanian from Honkastan.
A Honkastanian?
Yep, from
Yeah.
Honkastan.
Have you guys seceded yet? How's that going on?
Yeah, no, that hasn't happened yet. And all that rhetoric has been quite interesting that's evolved throughout this whole thing. So,
Yeah, I don't know. The fact that they're calling it an insurrection and all kinds of other stuff is quite crazy. My wife's bringing me coffee, so thank you. Oh, we're gonna show off a baby too.
Hello.
Hi, baby.
Anyways, guys, we thank you all for being here with us today. I try to do this every Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern. We run for 2-3 hours, depending on how much time we have. I do have a date with my wife tonight, so I definitely have a hard stop today. Mm-hmm. Our daughter has not really allowed us to get out much, which is what happens when you have a baby. So, we got out last night with her. We went and got lunch today with her. And tonight we're getting out by ourselves, so that would be good. Hey, Ignatius, glad that you're here. I think I missed the other stream, and I apologize for that. No worries. I had to stream last Saturday because I had obligations Sunday, and I forgot that it was the Super Bowl because I'm just not good with schedules. So last thing before we get into materials here, if you guys wish, it's up to you. You can go over to the Entropy linked in the description and donate super chats over there if you'd like, or just, be on a free speech platform in general. If not, then that's fine. Whatever. There's also a PayPal if you guys want to throw me a couple bucks here and there for my my good work here. Otherwise, guys, just support me by watching, sharing, liking, the thing, right? Help the channel grow. I do want to grow. I'm not thinking I'm ever going to be some big time YouTuber with hundreds of thousands of subs or anything, but I would like to have at least 1,000. That would be nice. Mm-hmm. And then next week as well, I should be having some Mises Caucus libertarians on, some of their leadership, and especially here in the West Virginia leadership. And then we're going to have the word is escaping me. They're going to have a caucus of their own here in Martinsburg, West Virginia, which is in my area. It's the town closest to me. So I'm going to go to that and schmooze and do whatever. You all may be aware that I was supporting Michael Cisco for Congress in the state, but Cisco has dropped out. He did that like 2 weeks ago, made a press statement about it. So I'll be supporting Mooney instead of McKinley, because McKinley is a bipartisan hack. He is one of the most bipartisan members of Congress. I think he ranks as number 20. And I don't like bipartisanship, honestly. I like gridlock. I like very little done in the federal government. I want to be left alone. Bipartisanship is the way to tyranny and the way to globalism. So anyways, hey, Dahari, glad to see you here, bud. In any case, Holly, let's get into this. What do you got to say? What do you got to say about this whole thing from a Canadian perspective?
I don't know. I've been watching this ever since the original announcements. Of course, watching the gathering in BC and then the gathering in my city, watching it go through my city and the celebrations and the people that were on the side of the roads waving the Canadian flags. Just the amount or the volume of people that supported this and the hope that it actually gave people, because things were getting pretty crazy up here. I'm sure every province enacted a passport. Then Quebec started going even more insane with two is no good. Now you need three. They made it so you couldn't even go to Walmart to go grocery shopping. You couldn't go to any big box stores. It essentially started unpersoning, a section of society. So a lot of people were really feeling crushed, and the general mood of the country was just hopelessness. And I think what this did was this really brought a huge shot in the arm of actual hope and pride in the country, that we weren't headed towards totalitarianism. Now, watching that all unfold and watching the rhetoric that came down from Ottawa was not shocking, but disheartening, to say the least. And to watch the playbook open every step of the way, it was dig up dirt on the organizers. Oh, if you support this, then you're connected to the organizers. They're all the catchphrases, all the ists and isms. Even our illustrious leader, he called them all a bunch of, fringe minority, racist, misogynist. I'm sure you've all heard that one. Trying to use that playbook to get people to not want to be involved, and it backfired fantastically. And more support started coming out. More people started joining it. More people felt empowered to actually speak their minds of what was going on. And the best part about it was most people who supported the convoy were actually vaccinated, because I don't know if you know, but 85% of Canadians are doubled.
I thought 90% of the truckers were, from my understanding.
Yeah, 90% of the truckers are doubled. They can freely cross the border, no problem. But it was the mandates, that mandate for the truckers to cross the border was kind of the last straw. And the way that they implemented it really struck a lot of nerves with people. So when you pull up to the border, your QR code that's on your phone, it automatically was picked up by the border, and you didn't need to show it. It was automatically assessed by the border, the government.
Right. It was kind of like an easy pass for tolls system,
yeah, but
basically.
It's an easy pass for tolls that nobody signed up for.
Right. And
Right.
what I understood is if you're within 20 miles or something, it's already registered. They know where you're at. That might not be fully accurate, but it's a quite a distance from what I understand.
Yeah, I don't think it's 20 miles. I think it's a little closer than that. But you pull up, you don't have to show anything. They just know your medical history right away. And so that struck a nerve with a lot of people, where it's just like, okay, what are you talking about? Like, I did what I was supposed to do. I got my medications. I have my papers. I'm, being a good little citizen, but it just kept marching towards closer and closer towards totalitarianism. So just that's what ignited a lot of people. And it's interesting to watch the playbook unfold, the smearing, the reporting on it, these are all evil people that want to do evil things.
They're all racist, bigots, insurrectionists who want to overthrow the government. And we're going to talk about that. I'm going to cover. We'll talk with Holly about the trucker convoy.
Yeah.
But toward the end of the show today, maybe the last hour or so, I'm going to talk about some things with CRT and their race Marxism. I'm going to talk about where this originates from, primarily from Lucius Truss and Alice A. Bailey. These are people that are part of the UN, and how this comes down from the top, from places like the World Economic Forum, which, by the way, folks, if you weren't aware, it's just an extension of the UN. All these people work together. The World Monetary Fund, the Vatican even works with these folks, because they're all part of this. The Jesuits, all these different groups. And I know a lot of people think it's the juice. The juice runs everything, right? The small hats. maybe I don't think so. I think it could be a part of it, but the religious aspect of it is ancient, and it does come from the Babylonian mystery religions. This is all conspiratorial stuff, but once you study the occult, once you study these organizations, these people's beliefs, you know where it comes from. So what they're doing is their beliefs are satanic, as in an inversion of what Christianity is, and this is what all this attack is on white, whiteness, heterosexual males, tradition, Christianity itself, and the values of liberty that came out of Europe. So that's what all this is about. And the truckers, of course, embody all that in their own way, and they can't have it. Can't have that message out there. It has to be worship of the state, worship of the Mother Earth, of the Black and Indigenous people, whatever nonsense they have. So let me bring up a couple things. Holly has some things, but I wanted to, just in trying to look this stuff up, I wanted to talk about, well, that's not the way I want to do this. Here we go. If you just Google search this or YouTube search this, what we get. And so this was BLM riots, a basic search, right? And lots of news stories, pictures. Of course, we all know the coverage of this from the other year. Here I put BLM riot dates. Again, pretty much the same thing. Now, what I was more curious about is how the riots were in Canada, because I actually don't recall. I was really concerned about what was going on here in the United States because people were being murdered. And it doesn't look good. BLM riot in Canada. And then we have the George Floyd protest. Of course, we have Castro's daughter there, and whatever else. Here we have BLM riots, Ottawa. Mind you, these people going around suddenly were immune to the coof during the greatest pandemic ever, the most deadly disease, right? And that this was a public health issue to allow racial justice, because so many Black and brown people apparently are being murdered in excess constantly. Somehow, though, they never run out. There's still, 13% of the population in the United States. They're nothing less than that, even though they're being genocided on a daily basis, apparently. And here, same with Toronto. Lots of people out. I don't remember there being any backlash of this from anybody. Here, this is going to talk about the terrorist. We'll get into that. Let's see, because I know I have a couple things. This was Montreal. Let's actually play this. And yes, I understand and I wish to proceed. I'm going to mute myself so we don't get an echo, guys. And by the way, let me know how the sound is. I turned Holly's mic up. If we're not balanced, let me know. I'll try and get us both to a similar volume. So here we have a lot of people loitering, right, and looting, apparently. We can hear the fire trucks in the background.
Blocking emergency vehicles?
Yep. Literally.
Literally?
None of this is insurrection territory there, apparently.
No, this is peaceful.
Yes. Oh, I bet them guys get a kick out of driving truck 420.
Yeah, this just makes me so mad, because if you look at any live stream during the insurrection, whatever we're calling it, the occupation, the number one concern was blocking emergency vehicles. And the one thing that logistics for the convoy took care of the most was to ensure that any blockade could be easily accessed by emergency vehicles. And there's tons of videos of ambulances and police vehicles and fire vehicles easily getting through to where they needed to go at any of the blockades.
Here these idiots dumped a bunch of trash for no reason. I mean, I'm not saying this is the most exciting video, guys. It's just something I found that, YouTube age restricted from 2 years ago. But we never heard about insurrections, did we? We never heard about that. In fact, if anything, this was praised. Look at this. Tearing up the street. Let's back that up a little bit.
That's one hell of a pothole, Montreal.
Everybody's just having a good old time, meeting up. Looked like a fire. Let's see. Jackie. Well, in any case, I mean, you guys remember the stuff that was going on. I haven't seen any sort of behavior like this, climb on top of emergency vehicles or any of those things. Of course, the leadership of the convoys just got arrested, or some of the leadership, because it seems like they're rather.
See, that's the thing is there were the initial organizers, the four that were the big four, and the problem with that is they're not leaders; they were just the organizers. And
right. Well, I was going to say they're very decentralized, from what I can tell.
It's incredibly decentralized because there was a certain group of truckers that were on Wellington Street that were right in the front and foremost. They were the ones that were part of the original convoy. And when the government enacted the Emergencies Act, the organizers went to the city of Ottawa and said, okay, there's provinces that have dropped the mandates. That was one of the things that we wanted. You've enacted the Emergencies Act now. So in order to keep people safe and protect the people who are protesting, we are pulling out now. So they decided that they were going to pull out when that Emergencies Act came into play, and everyone was being given those notices on their trucks. So you noticed overnight that, like, I'd say 70-80% of the trucks had already left who were from the original convoy in order to keep the protests safe, because they figured if we pull out and we say, okay, you've invoked this Emergencies Act, so this is going to make it dangerous for people. We came in peace. You're declaring war on us, so we are going to back off. They left. They said, okay, we're done. It's over. And then the organic growth of the movement that has no leadership, of just people that are just done with everything, those are the ones that remained. Nobody instructed them to stay. There's no great, leader out there tweeting out instructions.
Yeah, right? Yeah. And so, well, and from what I saw with the emergency mandates, they actually gained some more support from people who weren't supporting the convoy in the first place. So because of the use of the emergency powers. And of course, the reasoning is because supposedly this is an insurrection. Now, I brought up Jordan Peterson because he's been talking about this a lot, but primarily I want to play this video right here because it's quite short, and this is it's short and succinct. Now, Michaela Peterson had an interview with some of the truckers that was about 45 minutes long, but this is what their demands are. And it has nothing to do with overthrowing the government or an election, which is something Trudeau has stated. It has nothing to do with racism, which, of course, has been stated numerous times because someone had a Nazi flag and was saying that the Canadian government was acting like Nazis, which they are. They're. I mean, we here in America, guys, you have to face the facts. We have in both nations a soft fascism. Now, the fascism in Canada is far greater than here in the United States, but it is a corporate and private merger together with a strong amount of socialism. And what do you guys pay? About 50% of your income and taxes in Canada, Holly?
30.
30? I can think it depends then. I
Yeah.
know folks in Montreal pay about 50% from.
Well, that's not federal tax. Like we pay
Right.
federal, provincial, and municipal taxes. So if you total everything up, depending on what city you live in, it could be up to 50% of
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
income. Yeah.
Like I said, Montreal's more. I'm more familiar with that crazy town. I love Montreal though, even though it's it's a crazy town.
Yeah. It's beautiful. It's
Yeah,
absolutely beautiful city.
it's a beautiful town. It's great if you're single and you like swarthy women, and if you like brown skinned ladies, like tanned ladies, very dark hair, all that stuff. Great town to go to. Um, but it's fun there, and it's relatively safe for a big city. I
Yep.
I actually had a random encounter with a drug dealer once, and I was um, at a bar. He wanted to bum a cigarette off of me. Actually paid me for it because they're so expensive there. And then started asking me if I wanted cocaine or something. I was like, no, I'm all right, bud.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Montreal, like most major cities in Canada, are very safe cities, and I mean, even Toronto are, the center of the universe. That's a fairly safe city to be.
Yeah.
Um, Winnipeg is the murder capital of Canada, so, but nobody wants to go to Winnipeg, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know anything about Winnipeg other than
Yeah, you don't need to
it.
know anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet say other than I never have heard anyone ever talk about it in any sort of gleaming way, like it's a beautiful town or anything like that. I mean, I always hear about Vancouver, BC, and Toronto and Montreal, and of course there's Ottawa, but I don't know about. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've heard Quebec City's pretty nice too, but I don't
yeah.
know. Yeah,
Quebec City is nice. It's especially like old Quebec, where they have all the churches and all of that stuff, the old colonial stuff.
yeah.
Um, I mean, my city is known for the '88 Winter Olympics, and I think that's about it. And the Stampede. Yeah.
Well, let's play this real quick so we can hear what the truckers had to say in case you guys missed this.
Hello, everyone. I'm here today with Mr. Benjamin Dichter, who's the owner-operator of his own rig and integrally involved with the organization and ongoing activities of the Truckers Convoy in Ottawa. And so Mr. Dichter has something to read to us today, which outlines what the truckers have accomplished and wanted to accomplish and hope to still accomplish. And I thought this would be a really good way of informing everyone in as direct a manner as possible of what the aims of this protest movement, what are the
Real quick, I sent you a private chat, but in case you don't see it, I'm gonna go get some coffee real quick. I'll be right back and let this play. So I know it's very professional on stream to do this, but Holly will take care of you guys. All right.
the aims of this protest movement. So, Mr. Dichter, thank you for being willing to talk to me, and I'll let you say anything you want and also to take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Jordan. And so we just prepared a statement that can really solidify some of the basics so nobody's confused. So I'm going to read exactly what our statement is. The Freedom Convoy is a peaceful and loving demonstration based on the principles of unity and respect for all Canadians. We have come to Ottawa with two very simple demands. One, the government end all COVID mandates. And two, the federal government remove its digital COVID tracking app called ArriveCan as a requirement to re-enter Canada. We have not anticipated the thirst for freedom in all Canadians after 2 long years of restrictions and harsh lockdowns, which in the minds of sensible Canadians are not in the spirit of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and our esteemed Constitution. The supporters of our convoy have come from all walks of life and have been a source of unification for Canadians from across all provinces and cultures. We are not a group interested in identity politics or racial divisions. We are, in fact, open to all people who want to share their love and help with the revival of the Canadian identity. The Freedom Convoy leadership spans the country and comes from various Indigenous, rural, and urban communities, all who have an ambition for unification and freedom. Our demands have not changed from day one. End the mandates and end the passports. And we will all go back home to our communities and our businesses and help Canada heal from the COVID years. There have been many demands attributed to us that are not our demands, primarily from the legacy media. We do not want to overthrow the government. We do not want to remove any of our elected officials from power. That's what elections are for. We do not want confrontation with the good people of law enforcement. Within our organization and within our crowds, we have countless first responders and military veterans who are all proud of the Ottawa Police. We do not wish for military action. We want nothing other than for our peaceful and loving demonstrations, as well as our community outreach, to help inspire our fellow Canadians to have a voice and to appreciate the freedoms which we are fortunate enough to have and which many others in the world struggle to achieve.
So there is a little bit more to that, but I think these are all reasonable stances and positions. Do you not, Holly?
Well, that's okay. So that's the thing is this whole occupation and overthrow the government thing has been something that has been touted by the mainstream media and by the leader of the NDP party and the leader of the Liberal Party. And it has never once been officially stated by anyone that is within the organization of the Convoy. It's been basically it's the vote of non-confidence, Trudeau stepped down. That doesn't dissolve the government. An interim leader steps in, which I have some ideas about that, but I think that would be even worse than what we're in right now, because that's Krista Freeland, who would step up and actually take over. And if you look into her, she's a card-carrying member of the WAF as well, and spouts Klausisms all the time. But it's never been officially communicated that this group of people wanted to go in and overthrow the government. There was never an insurrectionist tone about it whatsoever. That's been something that has been pushed.
Right. Well, it's always pushed because there's always the corporate propaganda media trying to
propaganda media in Canada. What?
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, the fact that it's state owned and run, other than what Rebel News, a couple people,
all state owned and all
they're all
of them. All of them. And I know some. You guys know about the CBC.
How do they get away with what they do if they're state owned?
Well, so the smaller, more local ones, like, because there's the big ones that are in Canada, right? Like the Global, CBC, CTV, those guys. If you watch, like the national and the countrywide broadcasts, they all fall in lockstep with each other with the narrative and the talking points. The more local ones, like the city-run ones, they tend to be a little less biased, so you get a little more truth from them, but they still follow in lockstep with the narrative and the message. There's one here in my city called City TV, which is still government funded because they get government grants, right? It's a Canadian-owned business, so a Canadian-owned business is entitled to government grants in order to operate in Canada, right? Because they want to promote Canadian content. They don't want all us Canadians watching US stuff. But, oh, hi. I don't know if that was...
Are you talking to me or Holly? I mean, I got a pretty nice butt, but,
I've been doing squats. Got to get my freedom butt going.
Hey, Josh. What's up, man? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've seen City TV in Toronto. A fun fact, if you guys don't know, Canadian TV has like boobs and stuff in it. Not like here in the States where everything's censored. Although, man, cussing on TV anymore on cables is off the charts. That was like a
Yeah.
big deal like 20 years ago. Now it's like all over the place. But again, I think that this is not that I have a clean mouth myself, but this is a sign of our indoctrination into degeneracy,
Mhm.
and how all these things are top down, and they're literally meant to destroy what is good of our traditions, uh, of our history. And despite being different nations, we have a shared history. We are, brothers, sisters, cousins in one way or another, because we all have a history from Europe, and we all have a history from England. You guys are technically still under the crown, so
It's see, I'm actually an immigrant, but I don't count because I came from England.
yeah,
That's where I was born, and the crown, it's ceremonial and traditional. Like she does not have any political power in Canada. Ever since in the 1980s, when we did sign our constitution, Canada became a sovereign nation, separated from the crown. So we don't pay taxes to England, and they have no say in our government. It's all ceremonial.
yeah, right. But it's still under their protection, just like Australia and New Zealand, from what I understand. The Queen can technically take it back if they wanted. I don't know. I don't think it'll happen.
Yeah.
It will. Like, if you want to look at, you want to talk about like how do you organize anything, decentralization is the way to go. Now, if you put in the right people who think just like you, who are globalists and whatever else, which is what they do, then it doesn't matter that you're decentralized. It basically becomes centralized because everyone's on the same plan. But that's really, the way I see it. It's kind of like a smoke and mirrors, because trust me, London and the Queen, the Crown, cares very much about the New World Order, the Great Reset, all that kind of stuff. They care very much about the globalism. It's it's evident by when you hear people like Prince Charles or whomever talk about these things. And what it really comes down to for them, I think, in my opinion, is always money. It's the bottom line, right? I don't know why. Right.
That's what this is all about. It's all
Yeah.
about money.
Well, money brings power and freedom, and that's right. And if you can convince people that they are in an economic hardship because of freedom and liberty, then you can convince them to give up their freedom and liberty and enslave them, and to be good subjects and taxpayers for generations to come. And that's what's been going on for the last 100 years in all of the English-speaking world. So,
well, here in Canada, it's been interesting to watch over the past, I'd say, 10 years of the constant need for safety. And it's always been under the guise of safety. The other thing that I've noticed is because Canadians, we are loving, caring, help your neighbor type people, it has, this whole rhetoric has been pushed with, don't you care for people? Are you one of those people that don't care for another? Like, why aren't you wearing your mask? Don't you love your neighbor? And that's been a huge part of our Canadian identity, is that it's like, it's a big country, but a small town feel. And that's something that I loved about my city, living here, was if I broke down on the side of the road, within 5 minutes, somebody would be stopping behind me to help me change a tire. I even ask if I was okay. That's Canadian spirit. And so they use that against us to believe that we're good and decent people by doing this. And I still hear that now, that this whole Convoy thing, they're arrogant and ignorant, and they don't care about people, and they're going to be a huge spreader event, and the children, what about the children, and all that stuff. Like, they're not good people. They're not good Canadians. And it's been so interesting to watch this last year with Canada Day almost being fully canceled. Our Canadian flags flew half-mast for months. And the only reason why they raised them was so they could lower them again on November 11th for Remembrance Day, in honor of the veterans. And this has been a long time coming, where the Canadian flag, the symbol of Canada, has slowly been turned into this bad thing. And the rhetoric around that too is, now I remember hearing in the States that the US flag is triggering people because it represents, the oppression of whoever. And people are getting upset when they see the American flag being flown on a pickup truck. The same rhetoric has come here, where if you see a Canadian flag in front of a house, those must be bad people.
Yeah, the government
flag on a truck, those must be bad people.
The government here, the government in Canada, the government in Australia and New Zealand are all doing this, where people who are patriotic are now terrorists. People who want the rule of law are now the terrorists, which is completely absurd. And I left that comment of Joshua up on the screen because you all need to understand we are exactly where liberal democracies lead. We're in the midst of oligarchy. And what happens next is because the oligarchy becomes so corrupt, the strong man comes along, and then we will have our Caesar. And we don't want that. Things will be really, really bad.
I already have one. I have one now.
More or less.
It's not coming. It's here.
Yeah. Speaking of which, let's see what he had to say on Parliament Hill about those George Floyd riots the other year.
Ugh.
I can't quite hear what they're chanting because I don't have my volume very high. It sounded like they're saying something about Trump or whatever.
Yeah, that's the other thing that really it irritated me, that there were Trump flags at a Canadian protest, and Trump has nothing to do with Canada. Like, just kind of watching that, and people with Trump flags or Make America Great Again hats or whatever were kindly asked to, not share that because this is Canada, that's the States. But I think that is a wise decision because the TDS up here is insane. It's just as bad as it is down there. Like all of the.
Well, I think Trump is the personification of a of the idea of the dissident boomer right, because most people who are, a lot of people like me supported Trump because he was a wrench in the wheels, right? He messed everything up in some manner or another. He made them lose their mind. Now the reaction to that was the coup and the Great Reset, in my opinion. That might not be correct, but it seems to be the case.
Yeah.
And because they could not let him allow Americans to become economically strong again, because the plan for decades has always been to bring Americans down to the same level as the third worlds. It's hard to build them up. It's easy to break us down. And of course, this includes Canada, Australia, New Zealand, England. Of course, the UK has really been a mess for a long time. But, he's the personification, though, to them of all those standing in the way of the utopia. And that's where the vitriol comes from. And these people are not, they're not, in the right mind. They're not, they don't have proper attitudes or spirits. They're not well informed. They think they're well informed, but they're really not. They still believe in things like, well, I mean, the Russia collusion thing, and big news on that, guys. If you hadn't heard, the Clintons started all that, and Obama. They were spying on Trump, and maybe not directly, but their people were. If you think that Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama or Joe Biden or whatever if you think that they weren't aware that there were people spying and that there wasn't somebody in their organization who was giving them this information, you're very, very, very naive. They 100% knew what was going on. They knew that this whole thing was fake. They knew that they can manipulate the people because they don't think anything about you. Like I always say, when they say our democracy, they're literally talking about their democracy. Joe Biden gave a speech on the House floor. He never gave a State of the Union, but he sat there and spoke to the Congress and said, you guys are democracy. You are the ones that keep, all this together. And it's like, no, that's called oligarchy, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
And not to mention, we're not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic, but hey, let's not get into that. Let's play the rest of this clip. I'm just waiting for him to cry.
All right, guys. Are we ready to march?
Thank you for being here.
So we are asking you to please keep your hands, clean your hands often. We have a few stations with hand sanitizer, so please make sure you follow that advice.
By the way, folks, let me explain something to you. When you take a knee, when you bow before something, that is worship.
Mm-hmm.
That is submission to a power above you. This is an act of worship. This is a religious act. This is not anything. I mean, it's political because our we're religious beings, whether you want to acknowledge that or not. But it's political only because a politician is doing this and they're trying to enact political change. But it's really based in religion. And again, we'll get there later in the show. It's not a point that I mean, obviously I make the point all the time. Lots of people do. But we really need to understand what the enemy is instead of, I don't know, all this wishy-washy guesswork and all this thing of thinking that these politicians are incompetent. Some of them are. I mean, if they were more competent than they are, then their plans would be a lot further along than they are, Mm-hmm. And the convoy really, again, threw a wrench in their plans. Speaking of which, Holly, before I play the very end of this, how many provinces now have gotten rid of all mandates, or will have them all done by the end of the month?
I'm trying to think. I know BC is keeping theirs, but Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Quebec, Ontario, and I think one of the Maritimes have dropped theirs. They're keeping them up in the territories, and BC's keeping theirs. And people in BC are special. That's like Portland.
Yeah, I know.
They're try-hard Portland, Seattle. So I suspect that they're going to keep theirs for a while. But yeah, like even Ontario dropped theirs. Like Doug Ford came out and he was just like, we're done. People are done with this. The science is telling us to drop it. So we're done. And people lost their minds.
Right.
Yeah, Dari brings up a good point with the whole Give, Send, Go and the GoFundMe getting blocked for whatever. My thoughts were like, okay, well, now do BLM. Where did all those donations come from? Did they come from outside the country? What were they used for? What were they like? Were there any grassroots BLM movements that were actually trying to do good things within their communities? They received zero, but yet their organizers are incredibly wealthy now. But they've also stepped back, so they have no leadership. So the people that are taking care of the funds know nothing about the fact that they're taking care of the funds. Like, why are we not going after those things?
Well, all socialists are champagne socialists.
Well,
it's there's no real
questions,
socialist.
right?
There's no real socialist out there except for the few people that actually go and want to live on a commune like a real hippie and work together and have a little farm. Everyone else who's pushing it upon you, they're all champagne socialists. They're all about the money, the power, the wealth, the prestige, and the evidence shows. And here, kind of going along with your point, I figured I'd bring this in. The Lotus Eaters, we're not going to watch much of this, but they're talking about the assassination attempt that happened the other day in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah.
So, and apparently this boy who did this was and he is a boy, he's not a man. I mean, he's an adult, but you're not a man when you act this way, folks. Force is not how you get things. Force is a last resort, and morally should really never be used. But you can make an argument against it, at least in self-defense. But the bottom line is that's what children do. You're throwing a temper tantrum when you have to use force. That's exactly what Trudeau has done with this whole situation. So let's hear about this real quick, because again, this is not mainstream news. I wonder why.
Terrorist, in the sense of you give him money and he goes off and shoots people, and then
Which one?
oh, which one? That's a good point, actually.
They've got a few.
The newest one.
The latest one. Did we hear anything? Was there any updates on that rogue truck that independently ran over a few people in the end of last year?
I don't know. I assume they impounded that truck. The truck is serving its sentence
Okay.
of rusting away. The man who drove it, presumably out on the dole, about
Well,
somewhere.
I mean, it was probably a self-driving car.
Let's get update with the latest incident of BLM terrorism. So if we upload this first link here, you can also see Poso, who's very colorfully changed his name. I love that. Update: BLM activist Quintus Brown reportedly walked into candidate Greensburg office, pointed a gun directly at him, and opened fire.
Is that like a Louisville greeting?
That's just
A Louisville greeting. Yeah. I don't think so. I have family in Kentucky. I never experienced that. This is absurd, but this is where we're at in this culture war, in this civil war that we're in the midst of. And they basically cover this up, just like the truck of peace the other week that injured 60 some odd people, and I forget how many were killed. Stories almost completely disappeared. Now, mind you, if this was a white man who did this, it would have been racist, Nazi, and yada yada yada. And there is evidence that this is to some degree an anti-Semitic attack. We don't know fully the guy's motivations, but BLM is quite anti-Semitic. So,
Did you know, you heard about the incident in Winnipeg during this whole convoy?
With the activist attacking people, or there was the one who hit somebody with a car, right?
Yes. So they're at the convoy, because there's been supportive protests at every single major city in Canada, which of course you don't hear about. In Winnipeg, they were having one in front of the legislature, and an Antifa, a known Antifa member, drove his Jeep Patriot through a crowd of people and ended up injuring 4 people, putting one in the hospital. They're all fine. No one died, but it was nowhere to be found that this happened. And the only place that I learned about it was on freaking Fox News, and then some UK websites and news sources. No one in Canada talked about that, especially when it was tied directly to a known Antifa person. And like, just looking at the pictures of it, it was like a slender young person wearing a mask alone in his car. And they were trying to spin it that it was, oh, look at the violence at the protests. Look at all the horrible violent things that are happening at these protests. And it's like, yeah, no, it actually was an anti-protesters. And then you look at the anti-freedom protesters that were in Ontario with the actual hate speech. If you want to play hate speech, the kill anti-vaxxers and get these people out of our city, and the screaming and yelling at people. I think my favorite story was there was a trans person wearing the trans flag who was participating in the Freedom Convoy, who was protesting against the mandates. And they were interviewed by a few of the live streamers that were there, cheering and waving a Canadian flag, went over to the anti-protester side, and they attacked her and tried to rip her trans flag off of her because she wasn't on the right side. And it's like, just look at where the hate is coming from.
Right. We'll get there. I mean, we will get. No, you're fine. You're fine. Because again, this is why I tied this in. If I didn't have you on the show, I would have talked about this stuff in the beginning of the show, actually, and then talked about the convoy afterward.
Yeah.
But I figured since you were here, you being a Canadian, you're going to follow the news in Canada way better than I do. And, it's your life. So that's really why I wanted you here. I would have loved to have you last week on the Justify the Memes, but I understand you had to work. So, but yeah, because I'm going to break this down to some degree why this is, and it comes down to religious cultic behavior, and that's always a problem. It motivates people. We see this. We right now we've seen this with what we call radical Islam. It's not really radical. It's just Islam. It's how Islam started. And once the Ottoman Empire was established, Islam kind of chilled out a little bit, but they still had a high slave trade. They still had a lot of people who were captured and made eunuchs. There were stuff there that's in their religion that's perfectly fine. So much so that when the United States was having ships taken, merchant ships taken all the time, we started what was called the Barbary Pirate Wars under Thomas Jefferson, and he didn't understand why these people did the things that they did, and he read the Quran and was like, I can't believe this is in their religious text that they're allowed to do these things. And so when people talk about the religion of peace, like there are different sects of Islam. There are more people that focus on a spiritual aspect to it and not the violence. But when they do interviews, they do surveys, I should say, not interviews. They take polls. It's something like 80%, 60 to 80% of Muslims support the radical Islam. But it's something like only like 20%. That's still a lot when you're talking about 1 billion people. 20% participate in it or support it, like directly. So, and this is the same thing. This religion is infested in these people, and so they are going to get, in their attacks, their religious blessings, their 50 virgins, if you would. It's a little bit different because most of these people are atheists. They don't think of it that way, but they think of the historical aspects of it. They think, I will be seen in the history. The history books will talk about me like they talk about Stalin, like they talk about Robespierre from the French Revolution. That's how they think. And all you have to do is get on tanky Twitter or go down to some sort of activist and start having a conversation with them. And they'll let you know.
Oh yeah, the number one thing that I've been reading is I'm on the right side of history. Be on the right side of history. And it's like, could you pick up a history book and actually read it and go through the process of this? Because the right side of history is never with the totalitarians. It's never with the ones that are taking away the rights. It's never with the ones that are forcing people to do things. It is never with the ones that are depersoning people, ever.
Right. And this is something that Jordan Peterson really made prominent in people's minds, is that you probably would have been the Nazi too. You would have been the communist too. You would have been narking on your neighbor too. And he was talking about that for 4 years before the coup. And guess what happened? We saw exactly that. We saw the majority of population become cowards overnight, become informants for the government, become the enforcers, because they were scared, because basically they're grown children. And it just blows me away. And maybe this is how society has always been. I still do not believe that it is appropriate or moral to then say, okay, well, I'm not a grown child, therefore I get to be a totalitarian and dictate to everyone how to live their lives. It's absurd.
I think, like I was saying before about the Canadian personality, right? It's all about getting along and being polite and taking care of your neighbor, and that's, like I said, that's been used against us to the point where it seems a virtuous thing to rat out your neighbors because you're helping people. You're helping people by getting rid of those people, the fringe minority, right?
Right, right. Well, let's watch this because they cover the gist of it. Of course, we've already kind of talked about it. But let's watch a couple minutes of this, and then we'll see what else I got for you. Of course, we're going to talk about this convoy stuff for a bit. What's going on? And you guys are probably well aware that things are forming up here in the U.S. and from California are heading to D.C., which is awesome. Unfortunately, our federal government will probably greet them and treat them just like the people on January 6th. So, and I have a little video on that as well that we'll play here in a bit.
Hello. Hadley doodly.
Was he from Texas, like from Simpsons? Well, howdy there.
You got to shoot in the air for that one, not at the candidate that you don't like because of politics. We get the next one. You might wonder who the hell any of this is about. So this is the suspect. Who he's wearing. Do you read that? I'm about making my ancestors proud. Mr. Brown wants to make his ancestors proud, so he became a terrorist.
Kind of condemned.
Now, this gentleman is a not only a race Marxist, but he also has crazy beliefs like the Black Israel, or the Black Hebrew Israelites, where they think that they are the actual descendants of Jews. There is this thing out there where there are these people that get on these radical Black nationalist organizations, and they make up false histories. They believe that all of the world was actually controlled by Blacks and all cultures from Black people and yada, yada, yada. It's pretty interesting that they are the superior race, but, you know, the state of Africa is an utter mess, generally speaking. And they were, of course, a large portion of Black folks distributed across the world were enslaved. I don't know how you are a superior race when you become enslaved, but whatever. You know, I don't think that there's any superior or inferior race in general. I think there are superior, inferior individuals. That's my stance on that. But they believe that some of them believe that melanin in your skin actually gives you magical powers. Some of them claim things like melanin in the skin works just like what is it? Chlorophyll and plants, and gives them photosynthesis. I kid you not. You can go find this. It is out there. So this guy was already really, really into radical, what I would claim to be radical beliefs, crazy things that are ahistorical, inaccurate. And again, you go down this rabbit hole, left or right wing, whatever you want to call it, you are going to be highly polarized and to the point where he thought he could get away with a political assassination or become a martyr or something. I don't know.
I mean, your own ancestors there, aren't you?
Move on to the next one. There is a statement from the victim in the circumstance of this candidate. I don't know anything about the election, by the way. We're not even going to get into that because it doesn't matter.
Is Louisville?
No, it doesn't matter in the sense of terrorism always bad.
Obviously.
I just in case anyone was like, oh, well, maybe, you know, so, no. So as you can see, someone here, Bailey, shaken but safe. Mayoral candidate Craig Greenberg describes shooting at campaign office. Again, totally normal things. This is the future, well, the grave in which Americans are starting to live. In which, well, if someone wants to walk in and shoot a candidate because Black Lives Matter,
go for it. Here's your bail in advance.
So we go to the next one. We can actually just take a look at what happened, and you'll notice, and keep this in mind. This article is written for the Courier Journal. Just keep that in mind. The mayoral candidate and 4 staff members were at a meeting in Butchertown Market on Story Avenue when a man entered the doorway at about 10:15 a.m., pulled out a gun, and aimed directly at me, Greenberg said at a press conference on Monday afternoon. Just another day campaigning. A staff member near the door managed to bravely get it shut, Greenberg said, and others moved tables in front of it as the suspect fled. So a bad terrorist, but still a terrorist.
I misread that at first as a staff member bravely got shot. He bravely threw himself.
All right, guys, that's the gist of this. For the sake of time, I did want to play more of this, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to keep moving because we're an hour in. So, hey, guys, if you haven't, please, like, share, subscribe, the thing. Help me grow. I am checking over on Entropy every now and again, but the only person there is our resident troll, from what I can tell, and me. So I will keep up with the chats here. But you guys catch the gist of this story. And at the same time, this is, let me get it up here. Let me find it. This is what the media is portraying about the differences between the mostly peaceful Summer of Love and the January 6th riots. And mind you, I'm not biased here. There were certainly riots, but it did seem to me like the police were ultra aggressive with the people on January 6th. In fact, I don't think there would have been any violence if that was not the case. We need to do a proper catch-up. And maybe I can have you on the show sometime, kids, in a couple weeks. Not next week, because I have Will Heyman coming on, who's Mises Caucus organizer here in West Virginia. So we'll have to see.
This unfold in front of our TV screens and on social media, and many sharing images like the ones you're seeing right now, comparing the police presence at the U.S. Capitol during the Black Lives Matter protests, that's on the right, versus yesterday's riot. All
right, hold on, guys. I don't know why this is getting funky. It's weird.
Far different scene. Wake Up Charlotte's Billie Jean Shaw now joining us, contrasting the two at this point. And Billie Jean, a lot of folks saw those two images and saw what was a hypocrisy with the way these things are handled in our society today, which is one of the big problems that we're trying to tackle.
Good morning, Ben. That's right. And instead of putting a piece together where I spoke about it, I just put some images together, and I want you to watch and make your own conclusion.
About 20 minutes before a mandatory curfew started Monday night, federal officers and National Guard troops outside the White House suddenly moved on peaceful protesters, hitting them with flash grenades and tear gas while shooting rubber bullets.
I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them.
Okay, let's address this real quick. The peaceful protesters had set fires and other things very close to the White House, and they were talking about going into the White House. That's why they were moved. They were not massively arrested. If they were arrested, they were let go. No charges pressed against them. And the federal government did not, in any way, shape, or form, go after them for prosecution and lock them up and put them in solitary confinement. Didn't happen. And mind you, that happened for, what, 6-7 months, whatever was, however long it was. It was during the summer into the fall. When you allow those things to happen like that for so long, especially a certain political side, and then the other side comes out to protest, they're going to expect similar treatment. So why would you think that, why would you think that these things would be treated any differently, right, in general, other than the politics of it, right? The who supports the politics? Who is the establishment? And I watched a lot of BLM stuff, covered a lot of it, and I don't think that they were treated that poorly by the police at all.
Stunning images as rioters supporting President Trump overrun the Capitol, scuffling with police. On the floor of the House, officers with guns drawn, with protesters just outside the door. Here you see rioters trying to break down a door, and you hear a gunshot.
But we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you.
It was strange because it was almost like there was this call to not use force. Had it been the same amount of people, but had they been Black, we wouldn't have made it up those steps. We wouldn't have made it to be able to get into the door and bust windows.
Bull. I call bull because you didn't have any of this going on. And let's not forget the Department of Interior was broken into a few weeks back, and before that, the Brett Kavanaugh thing. So, bull.
And go put our feet up on desks of Congress members. We wouldn't have made it that far. We would have been shot. We would have been tear gas. We would rubber bullets. That would have happened before we made it there. We need to call it what it is. It's white supremacy. It was white privilege, and it was the call of our president.
This morning, a lot of questions are still surrounding how all of this happened. For context, Ben and Carolyn, we know that the last time the Capitol there was a riot at the Capitol was 1812. It is now 2021. So people are wondering how the security was.
There wasn't a riot at the Capitol in 1812. The English came back to take America. What are you talking about? Anyways, so there's our always very honest and accurate media for you, covering these details. And of course, Trudeau goes out in the crowd. We saw that. He says, "Thank you for doing this." Takes a knee in worship, and the Freedom Truckers, they're terrorists.
Well, it's funny to listen to the Ottawa City Council, the one council member. I can't remember her name. She's an older lady with blonde hair and glasses, and she was having a literal panic attack, screaming and yelling about how they have saunas and bouncy castles and a hot tub, and how dare they be out there, feeding each other and supporting each other and having a good time when they're occupying our city and terrorizing the neighborhoods.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty entertaining. It's like, yep.
You sort of won that rematch because they burned down the White House, but then I'm pretty sure Napoleon got things a little mixed up over there. So in any case, yeah, and here's a perfect example of that. These people just having fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are the worst people on earth. Oh no, sorry. This is the Tamara and Chris Lynch arrested. Sorry, not that big of a deal. This was actually really easy. They came over, arrested them, perfectly peaceful, no resistance.
And she knew that they were coming for her, and she released a statement and said, "Yeah, they're coming for me, and I'm going to go without fight, and they're whatever they're going to do, they're going to do." Like she,
and all the truckers said they would, yeah, which is good. It's great, and I. Commend that. I don't want the violence, and the violence will eventually happen. They're trying to make it happen. They're
trying really hard.
They want the right to be violent so that they can demonize you. And if you folks, I know so many people, when I talk to, outside of the stream and stuff, they get mad about this stuff. And I know it's frustrating, but you can't do it because you don't have any institutional power. And it sucks. But, if I ever get around to it, I'm going to try and really get back into getting this book I'm trying to write out. But this is sort of addressed in that because it gets twisted. Look at how January 6th got twisted. And I know a lot of you learned that lesson afterwards, but you don't understand how many people are actually not aware. When you talk to me or Holly or amongst each other in the chat, and we're all friends, you guys are hyper aware of what's going on in the world. Most people are anesthetized. They're walking around asleep. They have no clue. And they don't understand that the propaganda media is basically programming them. My wife brought up a thing. My sister said something. I don't know if it was on Facebook or whatever. I don't follow her on Facebook, so I don't know. I don't really use Facebook. Holly and I are Facebook friends, and I don't think I ever see Holly's Facebook. So
I'm never on there. I go on there to see pictures of my granddaughter, and that's about it.
I use Messenger, and I primarily use it to send myself stuff. So, but she said something about she wasn't supporting the anti-CRT movement in this area. And I just rolled my eyes because they're not teaching CRT in school. And I looked at my wife, and I'm saying this openly. My sister doesn't watch this stuff. I don't really care, you know, because she can address it to me later and whatever. But like it's like yeah, because all she does is I told my wife is all she does is read propaganda media, and she thinks she's informed, and she's not. And she's actually very, very ill informed. I remember my wife and I having to tell her that Antifa was organized. I showed her Antifa websites because she's like, "Oh, it's just an idea." Took it straight out of Joe Biden's mouth. You know, it's just an idea, and I'm like, "No, sis, it's really not. It's really not. Just because it's funny because it's decentralized, which is what they hate, but." Just because it's decentralized does not mean that it's not a organization that's organized. But yeah, she said that whole thing, and I said, yeah, she doesn't understand anything about this, the race praxis, race Marxism, and the critical race praxis. And then my wife was going on about a teacher my daughter had some years ago that I had to have a conversation with because she decided she was going to try and indoctrinate the class, was calling my daughter a bigot and a racist and all this other stuff. And I was like, yeah, you're not going to do that. That's not going to happen. I was actually very polite to her. It was very nice. But I was very annoyed, very angry. So this is the majority of the world, and they don't want to hear you when you try and tell them that. And then when you say, well, check out these YouTubers or something. Oh, well, that's not real. Or, you know, Wikipedia is a great one because before Wikipedia was totally corrupt, like it mostly is today, it was actually pretty good. And, you know, before the ideologues got involved with editing Wikipedia, it was pretty decent. People, oh, you can't, anyone could edit it. It's the internet. It's like, you know, you can fact check it. You know that Wikipedia has sources that you can go through. But anyways, anything on the internet's wrong, apparently.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Fox News, CNN, ABC, the Atlantic, you know, the New York Times.
Well, the interim leader of the Ottawa police force came out today, I think it was, and he was doing a press conference about people who watch live streams. Like, people shouldn't get their news from live streams because the live streams are misinformation. So like this that you're seeing right here, these two guys having a great time. They actually had a huge snowball fight too, which was hilarious. But shit like this is considered misinformation because it sheds a good light on the occupiers. You're not supposed to watch that stuff because that'll shed good light on it, and these are not good people.
Why is autoplay on? Oh, YouTube.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Like if you're following, like, you're probably not following it, but the Ottawa City Police Twitter page, when this new interim leader got involved with it all of a sudden started tweeting out basically what you're supposed to believe about this. So it was warning people to leave. It was talking about how if you don't leave, you're going to be arrested. But the truckers, the main convoy, were already pulling out because the Emergencies Act had been enacted. It was saying basically, be terrified, close your businesses, Ottawa residents stay out of downtown. It's going to be, you know, use of force is going to be used. Then they started tweeting out about how the protesters were being extremely aggressive towards the police. That's why police had to use this action. The police hadn't fired any rubber bullets or any tear gas and have not used pepper spray. But yet clearly on the live streams, you could see that they were using it on people. The horse incident, which I'm sure you're all aware of, it tweeted out that nobody was injured, nobody was knocked down, but then those videos came out, and then it was somebody threw a bicycle at the police. At the police horses, there was a bicycle at the beginning of the turn of the horses, but it was not thrown, it was moved back. It's on video. And then the lady that got knocked down, when they pointed out the bicycle, it was actually her mobility scooter that they had knocked down.
Yeah, it's funny because I had I've already memes about that, about the bicycle and whatever else, and absolutely absurd. Right, that they can lie to your face. You obviously are watching a woman get knocked over by a horse and trampled on.
Yeah.
But you can't believe your own eyes because the state says something else happened, right?
No, we're not using, police are not using munitions or tear gas or pepper spray on the, like, contrary to popular belief or whatever, we're not using this stuff on the protesters. And there's countless hours of videos from everybody filming at the front line of them pepper spraying people and
Right.
of people getting beaten with batons and like just the craziest stuff. When you look at the one, it's like, oh no, it's very good. We're just clearing out the people. We have to be a little bit aggressive because they're attacking us. And then you watch the videos and people are being attacked, like elderly people that have limited mobility, that can't move out of the way quick enough. The police are just shoving them to the ground and injuring them because they're not moving quick enough.
Right.
So it's interesting to watch that Twitter feed, and then of course be in line with watching the countless hours of live streams that are happening like in front of my face, real time.
So before the show started, I had this clip of Justin Trudeau talking about Quebec sovereignty because the Emergencies Act is something that came out of the old wartime acts, essentially. And the last time something like this was used was basically when Quebec was being they were being crazy jerks, more or less. You can explain it real quick, Holly, because I know you were talking about the beginning of the show, but well, we'll go ahead because there's a big Quebec separatist movement, and
there was the huge Quebec sovereignty separatist movement, the FLQ, and they were, for lack of a better term, actual terrorists, and they were attacking with arms, and people were killed. Like they went into Parliament in Quebec City, and they pulled out a dignitary from another nation and the premier at the time. They pulled them out and kidnapped them, and the premier was murdered while they were in his custody. So that's why the War Measures Act was put in, and the military was called in against their own citizens to quash this violent separatist uprising. So warranted, I would have to say yes, because it was actual violence.
it was terrorism, just like the terrorism we saw in the United States in the 70s.
Yeah,
and
it was 100% terrorism, and equating a bunch of bouncy houses and saunas and freedom pizza to politicians and representatives being kidnapped and murdered. I don't know, maybe I'm on the wrong side of history, but I think that's a different thing.
Well, generally, I'm not a fan of protest. I think that this was different, and a reason why I've supported this is because it is it's putting the economic pressure back on the government that the government has put on the people, and that I like, because as I was saying, I think 2 weeks ago, you have to spank them when they do something wrong. They have to be corrected some manner or another. They have to pay the cost, and that is the problem. We have no means to make the government pay the cost. Now we can make fun of them. We can bring out FOIA requests and all that kind of stuff, like my wife's organization does all the time, and people still don't know. They still don't ignore it because we have a whole apparatus that has been built up to solidify the state power and the globalist agenda. So we're going to let Trudeau speak. You have an older video too of Trudeau Senior talking.
The FLQ crisis was during Pierre, like Trudeau's dad, right? He was the one that enacted the War Measures Act during that period of time, and it was deemed so horrifying that the government had to do that was when the War Measures Act became the Emergency Act and was rewritten.
It was rewritten, and less power was given to the government.
And less power was given to the government. So the government was not allowed to force the military to participate on home soil. So this Emergencies Act, they don't have as much power as they did, but the way it's worded is so convoluted that they can do certain things, but that's why the Canadian military is not involved in this at all, because like 3 weeks ago they went, like the city of Ottawa went to the military and asked for military help, and there were people crying like, bring in the military, bring in the tanks, and the military basically just told them to pound sand because they were not going to be involved in something that a city or a province should be able to take care of themselves.
Well, I think that, you know, I mean, the easiest solution to me was talk to the people, get rid of the mandates. You don't need, and the thing is, we don't need the mandates. There's no reason for the mandates. Other nations have already dropped them. We know what the data says, despite what the media has gaslit the population about. We've known generally since the beginning, the first 2-3 months of the pandemic, which is and has been endemic for over a year now, folks, because we're not vaccinating our way out of this. This is silly when you have animal reservoirs left and right. But the first few months, we knew every major thing we needed to know about this. And within a year, the Salk Institute had discovered essentially that the spike protein was causing the major cardiac issues. And at the same time, then they developed a vaccine that only has the ability to create the spike protein and nothing else about the virus. And then they want to gaslight everybody that natural immunity is somehow worse or less helpful, which was nonsense. We know definitively now, there are plenty of studies that is nonsense. Natural immunity, of course, is better because you're getting immunity to the whole virus, not a portion of it. And I would also say I'm not taking the risk of my body developing that spike protein, even though it's attenuated, it's not supposed to be as powerful. It still causes problems. It still causes a lot of problems. And if we get to it, I'll show you some data on that a little bit later that came out of Israel the other week, although it might be a little suspect because the numbers seem a little high. But anyways.
I just wanted to make another point about the Emergencies Act being evoked. So there's the blockades on the borders, and those were the ones that were actually putting economic pressure onto the Canadian government. So there was the blockade on the Ambassador Bridge, there was the blockade at Coots, and there was several other smaller ones. The provincial powers were able to remove those blockades peacefully with negotiations with the people who were blockading. Those people pulled out, they lifted everything, and they opened up those borders. So the Emergencies Act was enacted after those blockades were cleared peacefully.
Right.
So that's why the Alberta government is going against this whole Emergencies Act thing, because Alberta is saying we cleared it with our provincial means, within provincial means, with our own police force, by negotiating and actually speaking to the people. And then, of course, Alberta lifted its mandate. So the border blockade at Coots, they packed up and left, shook hands, sang "O Canada" with the police.
I saw
the video
played a video of it, I think, on the Justify the Memes or last week or something.
Yeah, like it was, and then after that's when this was enacted.
Right.
So I want to make sure everyone's clear on that. There was no actual emergency. And then once it was enacted, that's when the Convoy decided to pull out.
Yeah. How you have that screen shot up, Holly? Because this looks like Twitter down here. Did you have the screen share? There you go.
Oh yeah, there it is.
Yeah, I don't want to share anything that's personal. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just looking at something else.
Look, yeah, well, we definitely don't. I mean, some guys might be happy about it, but we don't need any like naked pictures or anything coming up or anything crazy. Holly's like,
if there are any out there, it's from 10 years ago, and I looked way better back then. So have at it.
All right, cool.
Nothing recent.
Go ahead and hit play.
Okay. So this is Pierre in the 1970s during the October crisis, the FLQ crisis.
So what is it with all these men with guns around here? Have you noticed? Yeah.
Oh, Holly, you muted yourself and we lost sound. Did you when you screen share? Did you share the volume? Or the audio?
Yeah, can you hear the audio?
I can now.
You can hear the audio?
Yeah, but it might be coming through your mic.
Pictures of them. Aha. Is that against the law? No, not at all. Doesn't it worry you having a
I can find this.
resort to this kind of thing?
You gonna take a look for it?
Doesn't worry me. I think it's natural.
Yeah, it's so this is from 51 years ago, 1971. And this is the media was actually going after Pierre Trudeau because of the use of the military on Canadian soil. And there was lots of people that were very upset and unnerved by this. So it was one of those things where it was like, it didn't sit well with Canadians. And that was pretty much the downfall of Trudeau's governance, or Trudeau's the trust that people had in him.
All right, I found, let's see, not that particular clip. I found his actual announcement of the Wars Powers Act, but let me see if I can find this one. Okay, this says ridiculous watermark version, but apparently this is it. So.
With guns around here. Haven't you noticed? Yeah, I've noticed. Sir, what is it with all these men with guns around here? Haven't you noticed? Yeah, I've noticed them. I why you people decided to have them. What's your worry? I'm not worried, but you seem to not worry. What's your? I know. I'm worried about living in a town that's full of people with guns running around in. Are you? Have they done anything to you? Have they pushed you around or anything? They pushed around friends of mine. Yeah. What were your friends doing? Trying to take pictures of them. Aha. Is that against the law? No, not at all. But you have said before that this kind of violence, what you're fighting here, the kind of violence of the FLQ, can lead to a police state. Sure. That's what you're complaining about, isn't it? Well, yes, but surely that decision is yours, not the FLQ's. Yeah, but I've asked you what your own logic is. It's to let them abduct anybody, not give any protection to anyone, and call off the police. And that seems to be your position. Not call off the police. Surely the police's job is to catch people who break the law. Yeah, but not to give protection to those citizens who might be blackmailed for one reason or another. It's more important to keep law and order in this society than to be worried about weak-kneed people who don't like the looks of a
at any cost? At any cost? How far would you go with that? How far would you extend that?
Well, just watch me.
At civil liberties? To that extent?
To what extent?
Well, if you extend this and you say, well, okay, you're going to do anything to protect them, this include wiretapping, reducing other civil liberties in some ways?
So I think the society must take every means at its disposal to defend itself against the emergence of a parallel power which defies the elected power in this country. And I think that goes to any distance. So long as there's a power in here which is challenging the elected representative of the people, I think that power must be stopped. And I think it's only, I repeat, weak-kneed, bleeding hearts who are afraid.
So he basically said any challenge to the government must be stopped. That's, the gist of that, right? Here's
there's a part in there that's very foreshadowing that not a lot of people catch, but the reporter's asking him, how far will you go? How far will you go with this? And he's just like, just watch me. But then right after that, the reporter asks him, well, what are you going to do? Start invading people's private spaces? Are you going to start wiretapping? And he's like, whatever it takes. And this is 51 years ago. And this is before, obviously, before the internet, before cell phones, before everything that we have now. And he basically told Canadians that because of that War Measures Act, your phones are now tapped.
And here is the broadcast. I'm not going to play this. You guys can find it because it's like a 20-minute long broadcast.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to bring up was this. Oh, young Trudeau, when he's 18,
Right.
Sounds like a dogga. So we'll go ahead and play this. Holly, I'm sure get her dog squared away. Is that what that was, Holly?
Yeah, there was somebody walked past the front of the house, so my dog had to come and tell them that he was protecting us.
Oh, okay.
Former Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau was sounding a bit like his father today. 18-year-old Justin Trudeau is now a student at a community college in Montreal. It's one of many Quebec colleges gearing up for a referendum next week on the question of Quebec's place in Canada. Justin's position is clear, but as Neil MacDonald reports, Trudeau the younger likely won't be as successful in arguing his point as was Trudeau the elder.
The result of the vote is pretty well a foregone conclusion. Most Quebec students are about as interested in federalism as they are in lawn bowling. Nonetheless, the debate is on at 31 colleges among 74,000 students. Arguing the federal case at Collège Jean Brébeuf today was the son of its most famous alumnus.
Le Canada ne chie pas sur le Québec.
Justin Trudeau and his team were lonely voices for the Confederation. Lonely and unpopular. And his opponents, who want a fast track to independence, were cheered before they'd even uttered a word. Later, with a trademark family shrug, the young Trudeau said he doesn't much care what his peers think of his views.
Everyone's got peer pressure at this age. I mean, there's pressure to smoke, there's pressure to do all sorts of stuff. And I've never been affected by peer pressure. Never.
Students at English language colleges distanced themselves from the referendum when they realized pro-independence groups were paying for it all.
French schools have not taken an unbiased view towards this referendum.
The vote is set for next week, but organizers say they have no intention of presenting the results to the Commission on Quebec's future. They say the vote will speak for itself, a simple and direct yes or no to Quebec's sovereignty. Neil MacDonald, CBC News, Montreal.
So it seems like things haven't changed too much, huh?
Stated their mission.
And frankly, I mean, if Quebec wants to go, you know, they have a very different lineage than the rest of Canada, really. I mean, so I don't think it's a big deal, but, you know, it's how things go.
Well, it's interesting that Quebec sovereignty has always, it kind of strikes a nerve with Canadians because a lot of Canadians include Quebec as a part of our country. And the Quebec separatists have always been a smaller part. Like, they voted on sovereignty before. Now, just this past year, Quebec was given rights of a sovereign nation, but that doesn't really mean anything, because they're still paying into our tax system and entitled to supports from the Canadian government. They still use our CMP and they still use Canadian systems. So I think it was more of a ceremonial thing. And that's always been viewed as kind of okay because they are considered a distinct society within Canada. You look at the Western separatist movement, the Wexit movement, and that now has been painted as an alt-right white supremacist movement, and it's a very, very bad thing.
Yeah, so that's like BC and all that wants to separate, or
it would be, well, it's Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, northern BC.
Okay.
Northern BC is very rich in gas and oil and gas, and is very, very conservative.
Yeah, but say they're a lot more conservative than
yeah. Like, if you look at the electoral maps, the top 2/3 of BC is conservative voting. There's that little tiny piece that's on the lower mainland.
Vancouver, basically, right?
Yeah, Seattle North. They're either they have the Green Party candidate, they're NDP or Liberal. Right, so
the Hari said Quebec's trying to be Texas. I don't think so, bud. They like their socialism in Quebec quite a bit.
Yeah, no, completely different. If I was going to say any place was Texas, would be Alberta.
Yeah.
When it comes to culture, when it comes to freedom, when it comes to oil and gas industry, everything. Like our sister city or something is in Texas. Which is kind of funny.
Joshua Ham was saying, I used to drive flatbeds from Houston to Edmonton and back every week. Went through Coutts border crossing.
Coots.
Coutts. I don't know. I can't speak or spell or read.
You don't speak Honkistan?
No.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can't read in general. That the whole dyslexia things. I don't know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was actually asking Joshua Ham because when he was driving up here, that was when I worked for a trucking fueling station, and I worked in Utah, Calgary, Red Deer, Saskatoon, and I saw people from all over the states that would do the Edmonton corridor all the time. I made friends with a lot of the ladies and gentlemen that drove long haul. It was an awesome job. I loved it. I got to meet people from all over North America.
Kizza, in my experience, I'm pretty sure I'm correct about this. The French Canadians are the minority in Montreal, actually, but they have a lot of influence. Like they're the people that speak English are they seem to be a lot more around, and it's. They do just like the French do, in France, where they have all these language laws. They have to be bilingual to do any service industry, all that kind of stuff. But most of the people anytime I've been in Quebec, they're not French. There are some, but then you meet them, you'll know because they'll let you know, and they're quite snobby. So go figure, a Frenchman would be snobby.
Well, the best thing about this convoy, the thing that made me feel a lot of Canadian pride was the actual French Quebecois. They had their fleur-de-lis, they had like everything out there. They could not speak English, standing arm in arm with a roughneck from Alberta, flying an Albertan flag, standing arm in arm, hugging each other, celebrating being Canadians together. And that, I don't know if you know a lot about the history of Canada, but Alberta and Quebec have always hated each other.
I know there's a lot of provincial, division.
Oh, yeah. It's
but not just with them, but amongst many of the provinces, right?
Yeah, but Alberta and Quebec, there's a lot of bad blood, especially because Alberta is considered a have province, and we have paid billions and billions of dollars to Quebec to keep them supported. But then Quebec is considered have not because they've regulated their hydro industries to the point where people in Quebec, they pay pennies on the dollar for their power, and they're heated fully by propane. Right?
Yeah.
It gets cold up here, and I didn't know.
Propane's expensive, though. I mean,
Yeah.
natural gas is a lot more efficient and cheaper. So, yeah. I don't know. I haven't been up that way in a long time, but yeah, it's like there's a lot less French people that speak English than there are English people that know how to speak French. That's the way it works, and it's the law. You must, if you work in any sort of service industry, meaning anything that has like a register or you're teaching a class or anything, you must be bilingual.
Well, even in Alberta here, any federal ground that's in Alberta, if you work for the federal government, you have to be bilingual, and all of the signage and everything like that is in French and English in Alberta. And that's because of the French language laws that are from Quebec.
There you go.
Right.
Which doesn't seem to make a lot of sense because I'm sure you have even fewer Frenchmen in your area.
Right. It's funny because in school as well, it's mandatory for Canadian students to take French from, I think it's grade 1 to grade 6. So I took French for 6 years. Do I know how to speak French?
Probably not.
Like tiny bit. Like I can understand some of it, but I can't speak French.
I don't know if I could ever figure out their pronunciations of vowels and stuff because it's so alien to the rest of the Romanic languages and the roots of English that the Romanic roots, not the Germanic roots, but it's I don't know. It confuses the hell out of me. Every time I know I'm pronouncing a French word, I just assume I'm pronouncing it wrong. So, but the French too, in their legacy, guys, are very socialistic, which is why Quebec gets that. But it's very much in our language. The French influence in the English language is huge, and the difference between the nobility and the common person is the difference between French and German. So the more German words, there's a really good like TED animation about this. I probably actually played it on here before. The more German words were the lower working class people, and the highbrow people, the elites, spoke French, and that's kind of how English came about. So I think what's the example they use? A hearty reception or a cordial invitation or something like that. So cordial is a French word, right? And it sounds much more, much more foo-foo, whatever, much more elegant, right? Versus, a hearty greeting, which comes again straight from the Germanic. So just a little interesting random thoughts there. Language is really important in how we think and our origins, and this is why all these CRT people are and the leftists have to attack language and history all the time, because it's literally a window into our past is where our language comes from and how we think. I talk about this sometimes with biblical language. And I usually give the example of the talents, the parable of the talents, because for us, a talent is a skill that we have kind of innately, naturally, right? But in the biblical parable, it's about money. Well, that word came into English based on that biblical parable, but we don't use that for money anymore. A talent, it has nothing to do with money in English. It has to do with skills, but it comes from what that parable is. The person didn't use their talents. They didn't use their money properly. And so we think of it now as of course our potential in life. In any case, let's go into since I kind of was able to segue into that a little bit, let's go into this video from James Lindsay. Highly recommend you guys watch this full thing. I'm going to play about 10 minutes of this, very important, crucial 10 minutes at about the hour 23 mark. I might have to adjust this a little bit. But he's going to talk about race Marxism, the origin of race Marxism, why it's so important, why these things are taught from the top down. And then, as you can maybe see some of my tabs up there, depending on how big your screens are, we're going to talk about Alice A. Bailey and some of the origins and roots of this from the top down. So without further ado, let's just hit play.
Henry Giroux, and 6 or thereabouts, and then by 1989 is replaced with critical race theory. Of course, they would complain and say, no, critical legal studies is still existing. It's still happening. No, not really. They more or less wiped it out. And by the beginning of the 1990s, critical race theory is the only thing, and kind of document that in this next part. And I round out the chapter by talking briefly, and I mean briefly, only like a few paragraphs, on critical pedagogy, highlighting Paulo Freire, Henry Giroux. And, I'm doing a long podcast series here on the podcast, on the New Discourses podcast right now, about critical pedagogy, going into these characters, Freire, Giroux, etc. It's what do I say here? It's like the if
well, this is probably where I wanted to about where I want to start at, because he's stumbling around here. But understand what this video is real quick. This is James Lindsay introducing the book he just wrote and is releasing about critical race theory. The book is designed to start from the beginning and work its way backwards instead of the or not the beginning, sorry, start with present day and work its way backwards to deconstruct this, versus the typical order of a book, which is, let's lay the foundations of history. The problem with that, and Lindsay makes a note of this, is that some people will not read into the full book or understand it. And if he puts critical race theory as it is today right up front in the beginning, they can at least get that up front. And then it's fresh in your mind as you go backward in time. Reverse engineering is a very powerful tool for educating people. So I think it was a good decision by him to do such a thing. In any case, hopefully he's going to get to the point. And I know it's at around this timestamp because I literally took a screenshot of this while I was listening to it.
If you look at neo-Marxism and postmodernism as the soil out of which woke and critical race theory grow, then what critical pedagogy works as I say, is it's the plow, the planter, and the fertilizer. It's kind of what enabled it to happen. And I think we're going to see that, in the critical pedagogy series, which I don't, this isn't a book about critical pedagogy, so I don't devote a whole lot of time or effort to it. So I round out this chapter, approximate ideological origins that way. Deeper ideological origins of critical race theory. I'm not even going to go into detail on this here on this episode. You can read the book, chapter 4, Deep Ideological Origins of Critical Race Theory. But like I said, I've already kind of poked at it. Obviously, if this is race Marxism, it comes out of Marx. Marx got much of his inspiration from Hegel, and both Marx and Hegel got their inspiration from Rousseau.
So, guys, as I just want to pause it there. As he's talking about this, when I tell you these things all the time, I'm not anywhere near as balls deep as freaking James Lindsay on this stuff, at least on the CRT stuff specifically. But again, it's not hard to figure this stuff out and to trace it. And I have been aware for years about all this stuff. He talks about the Frankfurt School in this. He talks about the Rousseauian idea of the noble savage. And again, you really do need to understand the origins and the roots of all of this, because it is 100% completely flawed. It is backwards. And granted, Marx did understand that we started out with some communism, but he thought we would end there again, which is just absurd. That's not what's going to happen at all. People don't like it when they're poor. People like to have freedom and mobility and technology and stuff. And that's not going to happen without some sort of external motivation like survival to get you off your butt and do things. This is why people become welfare children and stay on the government dole for generations, because there's no true motivation for them to be more. They just get enough. And the government likes that.
And then the linking character, in a sense, in some regards, or a linking character, not the, or another very important character within the history of critical race theory is W.B. Du Bois. And I cover these characters. The only really interesting thing that I want to bring up from this chapter without getting...
Yeah, very good point. The tabula rasa is the blank slate for anyone who's not aware, and completely debunked. In fact, I think somewhere behind me I have Steven Pinker's book. I don't know. I don't know where any of my books are now that I moved them, because I'm working like 50 hours a week. I don't know where I put my stuff. But yes, the tabula rasa is complete nonsense, complete garbage. I would suggest looking into Descartes as well if you want to look at some origins of these ideas. And there's a really good book. I can't recall the name of it, but it gets into this and Descartes and the neurology of all this. I don't have a physical copy of it. I have a PDF, but maybe I'll look that up here in a bit and show it to you guys if you're interested in nerd stuff like that. But yeah, we're born with personalities. We're born who we are. The environment has 100% has an effect on folks. I mean, to say otherwise is absurd.
Well, with the tabula rasa as well, that's another thing that comes from feminism.
Right.
That men and women are born equal, and women can do anything that a man can. So that same indoctrination has been fed to us female types as well.
Yes, and well, because it's appealing. It's emotionally appealing to be like, I am a blank slate and I can make myself out to be anything that I wish to be. And it's just not true. It's absolutely not true. And it's funny because my wife said something to me yesterday. We were driving. We went out last night. We took the baby with us. So tonight we have no baby. My mom's watching her for a bit. So that's going to be nice. But she was saying something to me about this kind of concept, and that that we can mold people, that society's, going to mold people. And I said, that's 100% absolutely a leftist perspective. I said, it's totally untrue. You can't mold people unless you're totally totalitarian and you destroy and break their will and bend them to what you want to be. and that just makes you a despot and that, you know, a terrible person. Children are born who they are. You as an adult, what you do is you give them as much freedom as possible to explore what they need to explore, but you have to provide some boundaries and rules. Boundaries are the most important thing in life. Without boundaries, we would all just walk off a cliff, right? We need to have a specific set of guidelines and rules to work within, because without them, we have no direction, no path to take, no plans, nothing. And the left wants. This is why the left gives all this stupid. They use their stupid lexicon and to manipulate people's minds to break all this apart, because once they do that, then they can establish their own path, their own boundaries, and their own plans onto society. And so one of the other things that they do, and I was telling my wife this when she brought this up, is that they suggest that human beings are like children, that society should be organized like children. See, all these themes tie in together. And so when I talk about adults not being adults, but being children, this is exactly the mindset that they are in. They want to be eternally taken care of by the state like mommy and daddy. They're not grown. They have no willpower or independence of their own. They don't care for it.
Mhm.
And this is why you'll get leftist arguments comparing how adults take care of children and treat children who are absolutely innocent and don't have, you know, full functioning bodies or brains, right? They're not fully developed. And adults in society, they want to talk about them the same way. It's because if everyone's a child, then everyone has to be taken care of by the state. They don't want you to be an adult. That's what all this stuff's about. Anyways, let's continue. I don't want to be on here more than another hour, Holly. By the way, if you can't stay that long, please feel free to leave. I'm not going to be offended, obviously.
Yeah.
You're my internet wife, even though
Yeah,
we've been
yeah.
estranged for a while.
Well, you've been working too much.
We both. You started working before me.
Yeah, I know. That's true.
Getting into what I say about Marx and its relevance to critical race theory, which is basically that this is a Marxist theory, and I lay out Marxist historicism. I think I've done that here on the podcast. 6 stages, you know, of history. Primitive communism leads to slave economy, leads to feudal economy, leads to capitalism, leads to socialism after the revolution, and then leads to communism when the state becomes redundant. That's Marx's 6 stages of history. And I just say critical race theory has the same view. There's a primitive racial justice situation, one tribe to another, and then you enter
Kizza, you'd be the redheaded stepchild.
racial slavery, chattel slavery, and then the full expression of, say, white supremacy. Colonialism is tied up into this. There's a second stage. A third stage in history, we abolish slavery, but we have apartheid states, we have Jim Crow, we have segregation, separate but equal, etc. And so you end up with a kind of racial feudalism. And then in the fourth stage, we end up after a civil rights movement with colorblind equality. And then in the fifth stage, if there's a racial revolution, which they've been attempting since St. Floyd died and before, if there's a racial revolution, then we'll enter into a managed state of racial economics, cultural economics, which will be called racial equity. And that's tantamount to socialism. And that will eventually become automatic and spontaneous and lead to racial justice, which is racial communism.
Okay, so if you didn't catch that, what he's saying is that Marx broke the history of the world into these certain sections, right? And the primitive, tribal communism, all the way up to capitalism until communism takes over again, right? The critical race theorists do the exact same things because they're postmodernist neo-Marxists. That's what they are. And these people just took the same logic and put race in there. And again, I'm going to play about 10 minutes of this, but he's going to continue to go through this. I just want to make sure everyone heard that, everyone's clear on that, what he's saying. And again, I encourage you to go watch this or listen to it, I should say, on your own. I wish James did visuals. His lectures would be, I think, much bigger if he had visuals to them, but it is what it is.
And so I just lay out how this, what is Marxism? How does Marx think? And how does it tie in? And I do kind of the same thing, like how is the Hegelian engine underneath that relevant? And then what are the ties of Rousseau, especially the idea of the social contract, which Charles Mills turned into the racial contract, this idea that all the white people as the ideologists in society have an implicit social contract to keep themselves up and to keep the other racial minorities or the other racial groups down, even though they never speak about it or teach about it. It's total conspiracy theory. And so and Charles Mills, I've read his writing. He's actually a brilliant guy, very thoughtful guy, but he's a total crackpot with this stuff. So, you know, this is what this chapter is about, other than Du Bois and other than this note at the beginning, which I call a note on peeling a dialectical onion. So the question you might have is, why have I done the book backwards? Why did I talk about critical race theory now, chapters 1 and 2, then talk about its near origins, and then talk about Marxism later? Why didn't I talk about Marxism first, or even Rousseau and Hegel or whatever, and then talk about neo-Marxism and cultural Marxism and postmodernism kind of in the historical order that they evolved, and then tell the story in order that we get to eventually Black feminism, Combahee River, intersectionality, critical race theory in the present? And the reason is because I explain that with this, that this is all, you have to understand this is the Hegel thing, all dialectical. And to understand dialectical shifts, it's actually easier to peel the onion backwards, to start with the thing that you have now and to peel away and say, okay, you can understand that this is a reinvention of the previous. And the reason is because the way that the dialectic works is that it takes a thesis and it takes an antithesis and it crams them together into a synthesis, a synthetic creation that's supposed to keep elements of both previous things. And it's actually easier to see that if we tell the story backwards.
So you folks should be familiar with the Hegelian dialectic. It is the very thing that happens in Washington, D.C., you know, constantly between the two major political parties. That I'm a fake Republican who stands for constitutionalism, and I'm a fake Democrat that stands for the working class. And what do we get? Well, we get globalism. That's the Hegelian dialectic in action, in praxis, as we would put it, right? Or as Lindsay would put it, I should say. These philosophies are highly influential to the modern age, and most of you were never taught anything about them in school. Why is that? Have you ever considered why you're not taught these things? Now, me, I have religious beliefs, and I like a good conspiracy theory, whether they're true or not. I mean, I went on a tear a few years ago watching the moon landing was fake and the earth is flat, because I was like, oh man, this is incredible. These people, like, you know, believe all this stuff. And the moon landing one's a confusing one too, because it does seem pretty shady that they could get up there in the 60s going through the Van Allen radiation belt and whatever else. But supposedly they did it because you can see a flag up there today. In any case, my point is that I will entertain a lot of ideas, even if they're outlandish or whatever, to understand where they came from, to understand who we are as a society and where we're going. But these ideas of the history of let's say Marxism, critical race theory, the Hegelian dialectic, all these things are very important, because once you understand them and the first principles of it, everything that's happening makes absolute sense. It just unfolds in front of your eyes. It's once you see it, you can't unsee it. And this is also worked out in our propaganda media. You know, I know Holly said she watched Fox News earlier. She saw a clip of this or that, and I'll watch Fox News on occasion. Usually it's like on YouTube. I don't really watch cable TV, but but Fox News is 100% a part of this. Like, they don't cover certain stories. They're bought and paid for. They're controlled opposition. That's really what the Hegelian dialectic is about. It's about controlled opposition to push forward, as he said, a synthetic product, right? Some of the conspiracy theories of the past, and they're still out there, claims that Marxism was created because Karl Marx was a Freemason, and he made this plan to carry out across the whole world And part of the plan was to bring up Nazi Germany so that they could have like this idea in the future of, you know, a bad guy, and it wasn't communism. Now, I have a hard time sussing all that out, if it's true or not. It has to do with a letter between Albert Pike and Karl Marx, I believe, and also what's his name? Oh, the guy who started the mafia. Is it Mazzini? Is that his name? I can't remember. But you know, mafia is an acronym that stands for like so and so authorizes murders, arsons, and yada yada yada, whatever it is. Because originally it was like part of the secret society stuff. So, like I said, all these roots are really, really deep and clear, and people have been working toward this for a long time. And it sounds like it's crazy, but then you have James Lindsay, who's a mathematician by trade, mind you, so I'm sure he's pretty thorough, and unpeeling and uncovering all of the same things that the conspiracy theorists have been telling you about forever.
And that's why I wrote the book backwards. Also, because if I didn't start by talking about critical race theory, I think it would have been very difficult to get people's attention and who want to just understand critical race theory. So I then explained that this entire freaking project is based on what I call a dialectical faith of leftism. Critical race theory is just a racial component of the dialectical faith of leftism, and other components. Marxism was a part of the dialectical faith of leftism, but that dialectical faith came from Hegel. You can go listen to the 4-hour Hegel podcast that I did to get a sense of what I'm talking about with that.
So you're saying it's the dialectical faith. And one of the things going back to this, in understanding the idea of Rousseau in The Noble Savage, the Tabula Rasa, all of these things, is that the thing that Rousseau really did, as far as his philosophy in modern times, is create secular humanism, where we, as human beings, are the gods, and we create ourselves into a society of perfection, of godhood. And of course, this story was already told in the Bible, 5,000 some odd years ago. It's a little snippet. It's in there, but the Tower of Babel is a part of that. That's exactly what that story is. And it's been repeating all throughout human history.
I think the Marx part of this chapter is extraordinarily interesting, and I want to spoil that for you by trying to cram it here. There's some other episodes of this New Discourses podcast will probably cover it in some detail. And like I said, then I talk about Rousseau, mostly the social contract, the sentimentality, and the idea that sincerity are better arbiters of truth. Also, of course, the master-slave dialectic. So the little story I'll tell you here, just historically speaking, is that Rousseau, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the French guy, probably to be blamed mostly for the French Revolution, which, by the way, all of the communist revolutions are modeled after the French Revolution in their own ways, because they're all big fans of Rousseau. And here's another little fun sidebar. Rousseau is the father of Romanticism. Romanticism combined with Gnosticism is what inspired Marx, as it turns out. But Romanticism actually led to structuralism, and Romanticism led to existentialism, and existentialism led to structuralism. Structuralism led to post-structuralism, which is also known as postmodernism, and then that fuses back in. So Rousseauian thought's very, very central. But what was happening historically, is a little story I'll tell from here I've got in the book, is that Rousseau was looking at what, in addition to many other things, he was looking at what was going on in the colonial world. And he saw he misinterpreted, actually. There's good evidence that, priests or missionaries or whatever were writing, this is what it's like in the Dominican, or this is what it's like in the Caribbean islands, or this is what it's like here or there, and Haiti, being French. And then he misinterpreted what was being communicated, imposed his own stupid view on it, and said, wow, okay, so what you have are these savages who don't have any of the ideas of civilization. And here we have in Europe all these problems that are actually the problems of civilization, but the savages have their own problems. So he said, if you could figure out how to create savages made to live in cities, where the instinct and the impulse and the kind of more raw, noble savage, primitive knowledge approach could be fused with whatever's great about civilization and higher culture and European culture. And he thought there was a lot in sentimentality and sincerity and all of this in that regard. Then you could create something that he referred to as savages made to live in cities. Well, the philosopher Schiller, the German philosopher, saw this, thought it was very fascinating, showed it to his student Hegel, who thought it was the most fascinating idea ever. And Schiller, when he communicated it, said that this embodies the concept of Aufheben, which is to abolish, but also to keep and to lift up, that the Marxists translate often as to sublate, which is a straight up Marxian idea, which means basically to make the dialectical synthesis of. And all of these ideas all come back to this, that you have these. So Hegel saw that you have the European races, and then you have the primitive races, and he was totally racist about it, and they're backward ass races. And what he thought was that you have to have these differences as other to one another, so that there's a dialectic that's produced, and so that you then have to have all this conflict across the dialectic that works out the dialectical process and creates what Rousseau referred to effectively as the savages made to live in cities, and everybody's on a higher level through that sublation, through that Aufheben process.
So let's unpack that a little bit with what we've been seeing. So savages living in cities, everyone knows that black kids get in knife fights regularly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Everyone knows that burning and looting is okay because of racial justice, and these people need to let off steam, right? What they're literally doing is they are creating savages living in cities. People who live on impulse and desire alone, and they live quick and die fast, right? No, that's not everybody, but it's a part of it, and it's an absurd idea. There's something noble about these people who work and live and whatever together. Yeah, it's called a family. We all have families. That's what tribalism is. It's just having a big family, and we can't scale up to the point of a city really well, in my opinion. It just doesn't function very well. I think the best we might be able to scale up is about 10,000 people under any single government. I mean, it's just an opinion. I'd have to actually, do a lot of math or hire an economist or something and look at that. But I mean, I just see the effect of small towns and how everyone knows each other. Go to school together, how homogenous they are. There's not a lot of outsiders, and they don't have a lot of problems. There might be gossip, but they don't generally have a lot of problems. And once you get, a town around 10, 15, 20,000 people, which is still not that big, everyone's disconnected, it's disjointed, they tend to be out for themselves. It's a whole nother ball game. So, What's so noble about Stone Age civilizations that had no written language till like mid 1700s? Yeah, yeah, because the conquistadors came. Yeah. All right, a couple more minutes of this, guys, and we're going to transition to a few other things. And again, I got a pretty hard stop by 6, probably quarter of. I'll probably get out of here actually if I can.
And so this really is where Hegel got his fascination with Aufheben and with the dialectic, was from this view of Rousseau, which is based off of a racist misinterpretation of what actual missionaries were sending back from the Caribbean and from parts of Africa and probably from South Asia, Southeast Asia, that he was misinterpreting and putting a weird spin on. And so this master-slave dialectic becomes kind of the centerpiece, the oppressor versus oppressed thing, whether it's racial, whether it's economic, whatever, that's all master-slave dialectic. That's all dips back to this, and it's different interpretations on this same idea from from Rousseau. So Rousseau's relevance is multiply important, and kind of a fascinating little sidebar there. At the end of the chapter, I talk about W.B. Du Bois. don't want to belabor the point, but he's most famous for writing a book called The Souls of Black Folk. What happened was Du Bois, he's described in the late 1800s as being kind of a politically naive, sort of semi-libertarian figure. He ends up going as an exchange student to Germany and was going to finish his doctorate in Germany, but ended up not being able to. And after 2 years, he comes back to the United States, finishes his doctorate at Harvard in something like 1895, plus or minus a couple of years. And while he's in Germany, he gets just he has these tutors that are big, German nationalists, as a lot of people were. He started a habit of dressing like the Kaiser, celebrating the Kaiser's birthday. If you've ever seen pictures of W.E.B. Du Bois, you see that he has this weird facial hair and hairstyle, and he's always dressed in these kind of weird suits. And a lot of people thought that he was trying to imitate Oriental style, but it turned out he was actually doing his best imitation of German Kaiser style.
Yeah, he had a black man style even back then. Du Bois isn't so important. I think right up here, though, after this, Lindsay starts talking about how this is religiously motivated, which we already alluded to. So I'm going to let it play for like another minute or two, and if it doesn't get there, for the sake of time, I'm just going to move on. But guys, it's a great lecture. I was at work driving around listening to this, but I find James Lindsay very, very important right now because he is just delving into this stuff, reading all the material, and then breaking it down for the layman, and that's really something we need.
As a black man, and he brought a lot of this folkish German nationalism back with him. The ideas of Herder, in particular, Johann Gottfried Herder, and his nationalism, but also the primary tutors that he had directly above him there in Germany were also big German nationalists and kind of strange economists. And he just kind of brought.
So I want you guys to make a middle note of that too. We're talking about French influence and German influence. Kind of interesting. We spent a lot of time at the beginning today. We talked various things about the Convoy, but talking about the French influence and the socialist influence, and the Germans are really no different. Right? Remember, Marx was a German.
Brought their thought back whole hog and ended up getting a lot of this folkish nationalism that you see in critical race theory, where critical race theory regards racial cultures as folks, the souls of black folk. And black folks and white folks and all this use of the word folks refers back to this German folk with a V and the kind of nationalistic thought. His big tutors, by the way, were Heinrich von Trotsky, Adolf Wagner, and those two were both huge German nationalists. And then Gustav von Schmoller, who has a weird tie to helping create the Frankfurt School. And von Schmoller was an economist who had all these kind of very strange ideas about economics, and Du Bois basically repurposes his entire project in terms of race. But he's also very concerned, of course, with this Hegelian idea that he picked up there of the master-slave dialectic and the idea of a double consciousness, being the slave having a double consciousness. What does it mean to be black in a white world? And so he comes back with all of this, very significantly. So we lay out then what his view is. I don't want to spoil kind of the big punchline, but I'll just read you a little bit of this paragraph, just the end of it, actually. This one paragraph I have in here. When understood with awareness of his racial folkish thought, however, the dialectical nature of his claim, this is Du Bois, is made apparent. Both Negro and American are national identities that exist in contradiction exactly in accordance with Hegel's master-slave dialectic. There's no understanding critical race theory without understanding its adoption of this simultaneously and dialectically imposed and self-imposed racial consciousness that has its philosophical origins in W.E.B. Du Bois and his adaptation of German nationalism and idealism. And so what I'm really banging at here is that Du Bois is actually asking the question in the book when he's talking about double consciousness, the souls of black folk. What he's actually talking about is that when he says, he asks, is it possible? Let me find his exact phrasing. He's asking if it's possible to be an American and a Negro at the same time, in his words. And it says, it is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness. This is the very beginning of the book, by the way. The sense of always looking at one's self through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity.
And notice the use of the word soul there as an identity. Again, Lindsay does talk about it being religious. He talks about it around here, but I don't want this to play forever because that's already been like about 15 minutes. But what I did want to talk about is the larger thing and how these things come about and the top-down approach. Now, these things like CRT were developed in academia by originally a Marxist and racist legal scholar, black man, who then his student made it even like more distinct. I can't recall her name off the top of my head, but and then this thing gets passed down, and then it gets taught all over the place, and then we have the international influence of groups like the UN pushing it, or the World Economic Forum, the globalists. So very interesting. Part of the early 20th century was people dealing and struggling with these ideas. And one of these people was Alice A. Bailey. Now, someone you've probably never heard of unless you are into the occult or study the occult. But I mentioned her plenty of times on here, and we'll just read her little wiki real quick here. She was a writer of more than 24 books on theosophical subjects. That is, theosophy is a religion developed by not Alice A. I want to say her name so much. Helena Petrova Blavatsky, who is a Russian immigrant and mystic, and basically created a whole religion. This is part of the UN's religion, by the way. Aleister Crowley's involved in this, if you recall or know who that is, that name. They have deep ties with Freemasonry and all these things. This is all the conspiracy theory, and it's the origins, as it says right there, of the New Age. Bailey was born in Manchester, England. She moved to the United States in 1907, where she spent most of her life as a writer and teacher. Oh, let me see. I gotta turn on this other mouse. I still have two mouses. And it says Bailey's works written between 1919 and 1949 describe a wide range of neo-theosophical systems of esoteric thought, covering such topics as how spirituality relates to the solar system, meditation, healing, yada, yada, yada. It all sounds very, very woo-woo, right? And then there's Madame Blavatsky's name, of course. And then here it says, she wrote on religious themes, including Christianity, though her writings are fundamentally different from many aspects of Christianity or other Orthodox religions. And she's the one that basically created the concept of the Age of Aquarius, which most of you probably have heard of. I mean, there's that song, this is the dawning of the Age of Aquarius. It's actually a pretty fun song.
Beautiful.
Yes. So she created this organization called Lucifer Trust. Lucifer Trust was changed to Lucius Trust because it was a little bit too on the nose, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they are essentially the thought leaders of spirituality within the UN. And this is their direct website, but I'm going to show you, you'll see the links here. So the esoteric meaning of Lucifer. If you ever see the word esoteric, it basically just means hidden or secret. It's like a cult. It means hidden or secret.
Mm-hmm.
There are comments on the World Wide Web claiming that the Lucius Trust was once called the Lucifer Trust. Such was never the case. Actually, it totally was. You can find the documents on this. It's not hard. However, for a brief period of 2 or 3 years in the early 1920s, when Alice and Foster Bailey were beginning to publish the books published under her name, they named their fledgling publishing company Lucifer Publishing Company. By 1925, the name was changed to Lucius Publishing Company and has remained so ever since. Both Lucifer and Lucius come from the same word root, Lucius being the Latin generative case meaning of light. And that's all it is. Lucifer isn't a name, although people mistake it. It just means the light bearer. But the idea that the light bearer was a figure named Lucifer, an individual, is old, and it's in the occult, and this is who they worship because they believe that God was a cruel God putting man in the garden. He kept him from knowledge, and it was the snake, the serpent, Lucifer, who came along and gave man knowledge. And so this is what they worship. They worship knowledge. Recall Lindsay said that Marx was inspired by Hegel, and one of the things that he was inspired by within that was Gnosticism. Gnosticism goes all the way back to this. So again, when I talk about these subjects often, a lot, I say these words. I don't know how well you guys follow along, but it's a big subject to talk about because there's just so many ties, and I like for you guys to see the connections if you can. So Bailey's reasoning for choosing the original name are not known to us because she worships Lucifer. That's why she chose the name. But we can only surmise that they, like the great teacher H.P. Blavatsky, for whom they had enormous respect, sought to elicit a deeper understanding of the sacrifice made by Lucifer. So Lucifer is the Messiah in their religion. Alice and Foster Bailey were serious students of the teachings of theosophy, a spiritual tradition which views Lucifer as the solar angel, those advanced beings whose theosophy said descended, thus fallen from Venus to our planet eons ago, and so forth, and to bring the principle of the mind to what was then animal man. So they caused our evolution into what we are now. This is what these people believe. The descent of the solar angels was not a fall into sin or disgrace, but rather an act of great sacrifice, as it is suggested in the name Lucifer, which means light bearer. So that's straight from their website. So, support of the United Nations. Lucis Trust has a consultative status with the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. Okay. Why? Well, much like CRT is a religious movement, well, the United Nations and globalism and environmentalism are religious movements, and this is how these things all get tied together. So it says the Social Council of the United Nations and the World Goodwill is recognized by the Departments of Public Information as the United Nations as a non-governmental organization, NGO. As such, the Trust and World Goodwill are part of a community of many hundreds of NGOs that play an active role in the United Nations, particularly in spreading information about the UN and fostering support for the UN programs since their inception. Lucius Trust and World Goodwill, they're the same organization, by the way, they're just different names, have given the support through mediation, educational materials, and seminars by highlighting the importance of the UN's goals and activities as they represent the voice of their peoples and the nations of the world. And you notice, if you haven't heard, the UN is preaching, just like the World Economic Forum, diversity, diversity, diversity. And the poor, underprivileged peoples of the world and those evil whites. World Goodwill at the UN blog. So here's a little blog. Manifesting the vision of a one world humanity. What does the title mean? Well, I hope we will get some sense of this by taking a brief look at the way the UN emerged and how it performs some of the most important work, namely the preparation and implementation of declarations and conventions. And we can go into all this, but mainly, again, for the sake of time, I want you guys to just know where you can go to find this information for yourself. So here is another source, again, This is christianbeliefs.org/the Fuel Project /Alice A. Bailey. The Fuel Project's a really interesting video series. Actually, I own a DVD copy of this, but you can watch it completely free on YouTube. Of their case they're laying out for Christianity and all of the world. I don't agree with everything they submit, but they submit a lot of truth. And so if you want to learn about that, episode 66 is a 10-minute episode you can find on YouTube, guys. But more importantly, and I'm going to go into deeper, darker conspiracy web places. The 10-point plan by Alice A. Bailey and the New World Order for the destruction of Christianity. And CRT is a part of this, make no mistake. While the church sleeps, the devil is damaging souls with the Babylonian system. I would agree with that. The United States is a modern Babylon. Here is the strategy crafted by occultist Alice A. Bailey, and was the leader of Luciferian Society, who created the 10-point charter set to destroy the traditional Judeo-Christianity and lay the foundations of the New Age movement. So, this is, in my mind, being a person of faith, the real conspiracy theory, right? Whether you believe in the principles and principalities of the air, spiritual beings, or any of that stuff, I don't care. This is what these people think. It absolutely is. And Christianity is standing in the way, and they can't say that directly. So what they say, well, they say white males, your European heritage, the things that were here before must be removed for the new age to come in, because those are the old world ways of thinking, and we need a new world, a world of equity and peace and tranquility and utopia for all at the point of a gun. And if you don't like it, well, we'll kill you or throw you in prison. But everyone else, they're going to be happy, and they'll own nothing and like it. So take God and prayer out of the education system. It's an old one you'll hear Christians talk about all the time. Reduce parental authority over the children. You can read this in Leon Skolson's what is it? Was it 47 or whatever point? How many points? 55 points he read on the House floor back in the 1960s. It's in his book, The Naked Communist, or The Naked Socialist, that is. Reduce parental authority over children. Break the communication between children and child. Why? So the parents do not pass their Christian traditions to their children. Liberate children from the bondage of their parents' traditions. Now, Lindsay released a thing on child grooming several weeks back. You should watch. I think I brought it up last week. This is a common strategy. This strategy goes all the way back to one of the original communists who wrote his communist plans down, Plato. Well, he claimed they were Socrates' plans, but whatever. Promote excessive children's rights. And this goes into the pedophilia thing. Abolish corporal punishment. Teachers are the agents of implementation. From workshops, teachers tell children, your parent has no right to force you to pray or read your Bible, yada, yada, yada. It goes on. You are yourselves have your own right of your own. You need to have a right of your own. You need to discover yourself. Self-expression, self-realization, self-fulfillment are all buzzwords. Does any of this sound familiar? Now, Holly, I know you're, I'm 41. You don't have to give up your age, but you're a bit older than I am. But I'm sure you were indoctrinated with many of these things in school, were you not?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, all of this here, like this is not new to me at all.
Right.
Like just listening to this and watching or looking at these 10 steps and all that stuff. Like, of course, the UN is very involved in Canada. I mean, part of our military missions are UN missions, and they do earn a special medal for participating in UN peacekeeping missions.
Right.
So the UN is very much a part of my society. So, of course, when I went to school, it was you're free to explore, and like as a woman, all of this indoctrination into crystals and reading your horoscope in the papers and all of that stuff was considered more elevated than being a good Christian woman staying at home with your family, raising your children, all of that stuff has always been very looked down upon in my lifetime. And that was kind of the real push for it, was my generation.
Yeah, I grew up real strict, kind of religiously, but my parents had us in public school. We were always a part of the world, so the influence of the world became more influential than my parents, and that's exactly what happens. This is what the whole doctrine of early socialization is about, folks. Your children do not need to be socialized with other children in schools all day long. They don't need to sit and be indoctrinated all day long in a certain kind of organizational mind molding. That's not necessary. I know I've argued with Wes Wyleven. I haven't talked to Wes in a long time, but I've talked to argue with him about this because he thinks it's important for society, and I don't. I think it's actually creating more robotic individuals, more NPCs. And remember, folks, robot, if you don't know the nerd stuff, is a Czech word which means slave. So
yeah. So I remember being in I think it was high school, and we were learning about the design of school buildings. And my teacher was a really good teacher, and he was talking about the design of school buildings. If you notice, all of the windows have special shatterproof glass. All of the doors are built in such a way that they can be locked from the outside, and all of the walls are concrete. And he was saying that basically what it is it's been built on the foundation of teaching children to work in a factory within the Industrial Revolution. The fact that the bell that announces the breaks and when you go for lunch or when you change class, it's indoctrinating children to understand that alarm is when you're supposed to do the thing. Like, you hear an alarm, that's when you go eat. And he equated it to almost a Pavlovian indoctrination into when you're supposed to perform certain things. So as a teenager, that's when I woke up and went, I'm being indoctrinated. So he was right.
It's literally based on the Prussian system, which, again, nationalism, authoritarian. The Prussians were Germans, folks. That's where these things come from. Like, we talk often in America about how we're liberty-minded, this and that. We have so much influence, though, from other parts of the world. This was why it was a debate to even allow Germans into the United States as immigrants very early on, because our lineage is British. It isn't German or French. Something Sargon harps on about quite a bit. Now, we have a common lineage of Rome, but that's another subject, a whole nother subject. But yeah, if you guys want to learn about that and you don't know or aren't aware, John Taylor Gatto is a really good source of that. I would also highly suggest, if you've never seen them, checking out Scarlett Iserbead's interviews that Alex Jones did numerous years ago, because she talks about it. And she worked in the government and did research and uncovered why they were actually doing this stuff. A lot of the stuff comes through the Rockefellers in the past and their influence. But again, another tangent, another rabbit hole. Destroy the family structure. We know why. Promote sexual promiscuity. And these are highlights, bullet points. I brought this up, but this is all throughout her writings. I was trying to find the direct quote, but I'm pretty sure there's a direct quote from Alice A. Bailey about how Christianity must be destroyed in order to bring in the New Age. But perhaps I'll correct myself and find it next week, just to show you guys. Promote sexual promiscuity. Free young people from the concept of premarital sex. Let them have free sex. Huh? What'd you say, Holly? Did I freeze or did you freeze?
You froze first and then I froze.
Oh, okay. Looks like we're playing good though. We're back. So promote sexual promiscuity, right? Have sex, all that stuff. I mean, for sure, in the 90s was certainly a thing going around when I was in school.
Well, that's like coming from my perspective. from someone who is indoctrinated into feminism. That was one of the things that was used to destroy and break down women. And I know we've talked about it in the past, like the women hold the power of sex, men hold the power of relationships. And if women are actively giving away their power and destroying themselves under the guise of you are now free, you've been lifted out of your oppression by oppressing yourself, and then later on in life wondering why you no longer have value because you're no longer young and attractive, and you're still trying to be sexually promiscuous, but you're in your 50s and no, I'm going to say this, no man wants you in that way anymore. And it's very hurtful to women because they haven't placed any value in anything else, so that thereby destroys 50% of the population.
I see Anti-Commie and Joshua Hammer kind of, I don't know, pushing back and forth. Liberalism is about freedom, Josh. Yeah, well, I think Josh was using the colloquial liberalism because I consider myself a classical liberal. But I believe that all the good classical liberals, if you read them, believe in boundaries. They believe in God. They believe in order. They believe in rule of law. What we're talking about, really, the word should really be libertinism. That's what's going on here. It's about being libertine. And again, another occultist in this kind of influential ways had ties to the Bushes and the UN and all kinds of stuff was Aleister Crowley. Now, he wrote the Book of the Law. I actually have a copy of it somewhere. And he said the whole of the law is do what thou willst. Do whatever you please. Do what you like. That's libertinism. Something different. And in fact, the libertarians stole the word libertarian from the libertines and reappropriated it because classical liberal people weren't using, and liberal had been appropriated by the progressives. So, and that's really what it's about. And the progressives are progressing toward world order, guys. But right here's a quote about abortion. Abortion, as told by Christians, is oppressive and denies our rights. We have a right to choose whether we want to have a child or not. Sure, don't have sex then. I don't know. Take birth control. If a woman does not want to the pregnancy, she should have the freedom to get rid of the pregnancy. Painless and easy as possible. Today is not only accessible, it is forced. Today, abortion is a strategy to curb population control with the use of condoms and pills. Again, goes back to that. They're Malthusians. And you guys think whatever about abortion. I think it's the taking of an innocent life, a unique individual born into the world, never given a chance at life, and it's wholly a selfish act. And that's the biggest thing for me, too, is that everything that we do in the modern world seems to be fully selfish and focused on the individual, as Joshua put it, the humanism, right?
That's the humanism. Like I've watched through my lifetime abortion go from something that was 100% spoken in hushed tones. It was something that was not revered. It was something that it was like a last resort that women would turn to, and it was something that women would go through counseling and grieve, right? Because, like you said, it is taking an innocent life for whatever reason. And in my lifetime, it's gone from something that was not considered a good thing, but a necessary thing in society, to now revered and celebrated, where women are walking around with t-shirts on saying, like, I've had 14 abortions and stuff like that. Not
or calling yourself a slut and whatever, right? To be
yeah,
proud
it's
of
like,
those things.
I hope I get pregnant so I can get an abortion, stuff like that. And I'm sitting here just with slack jaw going, what are we talking about here? And the education around it too. Like the education before was very clear around it. Like, you, as a woman, you knew what you were going into when you decided to go through a procedure. You were completely educated on what was going to happen, what was going to happen to your body. the increased risks to you, your future fertility and such. And that's slowly gone by the wayside to now it's like a drive-through. You just, go and order your quick get rid of it and you're done. And there's a lot of women who are younger than myself that are kind of at that baby making age that did go through the procedure that are suffering infertility and miscarriage because they weren't educated on what actually happens to your body as a woman when something like that is performed on you. And it's something that I always knew. It's like, okay, well, if I go do this, this is the potential outcome for me. And women younger than myself, they weren't educated like that. So they're now married and they want to start having families and they can't because they've been damaged.
Yeah, well, I mean, they purposely tell lies about abortion. They act like these women have abortions and there's no emotional attachment. I'm sorry, ladies out there, but when you're pregnant, you're going to have an emotional attachment to a baby that's not even born yet. It's what happens. Holly, you got several kids. I'm pretty sure it happened to all three of them, right?
Yep. I've been, it's funny too, because when I go to the doctors, like I've been pregnant 3 times and I have 3 children. And when I go to the doctor now and I get my annual and I get all my bits checked up, there's always the questions like, how many times have you been pregnant in your life? And I'm like 3. And they ask, well, okay, well, how many miscarriages have you had? And I say 0 that I know of, because who knows what happens with nature. Right. And then they ask me, okay, and how many procedures have you had? And I say 0. And I am rare and an anomaly. Doctors are always shocked. It's like, really? You've never had a miscarriage or an abortion? And I'm like, no, I never have. And they're
think you're probably rather healthy though, because you were an athlete for a long time. So like my wife had, for her first baby, had an amazing birth. The midwife and the nurse midwife were like shocked. They kept saying it was the most calm, most beautiful birth we've ever seen. And like, these ladies have been doing it for a long time. The nurse midwife had 8 kids of her own.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I did all 3 of mine with no drugs. I did do them in a birthing center, hospital, connected to a hospital here in Canada. And I would have to say my last one, my 3rd one, she was the hardest. She was not a beautiful birth, but the first one was a first and the second one was fine. And the 3rd she was a pain in the butt.
Yeah. So I'm just going to scroll through these real quick. Homosexuality is an alternative lifestyle. Again, she talked about all these things. These things come from literally occultists who are anti-Christian, and that's the point of all this. There's more that I had, but I'm going to have to get going. This is Goodwill and one of Alice A. Bailey's books. Here's an interesting article I stumbled upon: Bill Gates and the Lucifer Trust. Last week I wrote about Bill Gates' connection to eugenics, Nazis, and white supremacy. But again, we're not going to go through all this. Here was another like random website that talked about some of these things, but they are there. This is not a joke, guys. I try to be very accurate when I talk about this stuff because it's important, and it's no one tells you this, and the people who do, well, I mean, the only person that openly talks about this regularly that I see that's popular would be like someone like Alex Jones. But you'll get some of this from some Christian groups that know about it, talk about it, but most don't. Most aren't aware because they're just part of the system. This was an interesting thing from the Lotus Eaters. I just wanted to show you guys. I always have more than what I can put into the show. But it talks about the World Economics Forum's tendrils and stuff. Here was the World Economic Forum's mission statement. Again, maybe I'll talk about this next week. And then here we had George Soros decrying China before the Olympics. It's quite interesting.
Hold on. So George Soros was talking against China,
saying how they were authoritarians.
but because Justin Trudeau has that famous video from 2012 that talks about how he admires China because they want to go do green technology. They can change their economy on a dime.
100%. I play that on Wednesday's show over on Let's Talk About the Memes.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorite videos, and I remember seeing it 2 or 3 years ago again and thinking, well, yeah, that's what he wants. He wants to be able to do whatever he wants and everyone to just bow to him. And I'd say probably 70% of Canadians are like, yes, go change everything. And then there's the 30% that actually don't need authoritarianism in their lives, sitting there going, no, we don't want to do that. And as a fringe minority, we're the stick in his craw right now. The connection to the WEF and our government, I'm sure you've got videos of that too, is the, several members of our parliament on all sides, conservative, NDP, and liberal, are all sitting members on the WEF. Like our finance minister, Freeland, she's a proud member that sits on a seat of the WEF, and she spouts the rhetoric all the time. So
you guys, Canada has a lot of its origins with the Fabians and the Fabian Society. And if you guys don't know, the Fabians are socialist. Their literal seal is a wolf in sheep clothing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's on their seal, a wolf in sheep's clothing, because they were the nice socialists. And the Fabians started basically the Labour Party in the UK, and nearly bankrupt the nation in the 70s into the 80s. So these are all vestiges of that. You really have to understand these people have never been about supporting your life and your freedom and your liberty. It's always about their goals. And one of the reasons why Orwell is so important, and Peterson talks about this all the time, is because he understood this. He understood, even though he himself was a socialist. I can never wrap my head around how Orwell didn't figure out that socialism is a complete nightmare. But even though he himself was a socialist, he saw all the problems, and he knew that the people who ran these things hated the poor because they're elites. They think you're scumbags. They think you're worthless. They really do. And that's one of the reasons why they need to divide and conquer everybody, right? Because they need you to know your place, and you can't enter the elite ranks unless you become a part of their religion, more or less. Go, if you want to watch a really interesting thing, Lantian Childs was I think it's not, was it The Voice? It wasn't American Idol. It was like Pop Star. It was one of those shows he was on in, I think, New Zealand. He was the winner of. And he goes through, there's a video you can find on YouTube of him. He goes through and he talks about his occult ties and the links to it. And again, I'm not saying everything he's saying is true, whatever else. Now, he seems to think so. And it's like a 5-hour-long video he put together of Hollywood and people in power doing nothing but Freemason symbols. By the way, it doesn't mean that they're Masons. It just means they're part of the occult. The Masonry is just a big front for the occult. And it's a big front for people to sort out people who will actually participate and implement power, and who's just a pleb and, an uninitiate, a profane person, as they call them. But in fact, let me pull that up so you guys can see that. If you've never heard of this or seen it, big shout out to Brother Augustine, Michael Witkoff, for telling me about this, because I never even heard of this thing. But
well, that's the thing too. You just look at the convoy and what that represents. That represents the working class, like 100%. There was construction workers, waitresses, nurses, truck drivers, tow truck drivers, garbage men, like people from all walks of life, all skin colors, all religions coming together to speak out. But the only unifying tie-in was the fact that they just didn't want authoritarian rule. And you look at the rhetoric that was used against them. And then the people that were cheering on the hatred of these people, those were the ones that are they hope to be a part of the elites. They want so desperately to be a part of the elites. And if history has taught us anything, they're just the second group that's up against the wall. You look at the history of the USSR, right? Like they got rid of all the workers out of the fields and left the farmers, the ones that own land. Who did they go after next? They went after the farmers, right? So to think that you're in the group, you're not in the group.
Yep.
It's a very, very small group.
So here's one I just found. Attilian Childs, Atlantean Attilian, whatever his name is. I don't know this dude. He's from Australia. Okay, it's from the X Factor. That's what it is. Here is the full 5-hour one, but you can watch it in episodes as well. But I encourage you guys. You want to go learn some stuff, understand what's actually going on, or at least what I believe is actually going on, because I think that this is a spiritual battle. I think this is a matter of religious perspectives. But even if I'm wrong in that, then what we can say is a spiritual battle, as in the souls or the psyche of people who wish to be free versus those who wish to enslave you. So very interesting stuff, though. And I can actually confirm all that because I have a ton of occult books. I spent a lot of my 20s studying this stuff, guys. And then I got this divorce and kind of stopped reading books so much and sat on things for a while, but got into the whole YouTube thing and whatever else. But yeah, guys, it's scary. It's very scary, and he's not the only one that claims these things. But you have to make up your own mind. I'm not here to really convince you. I'm just here to, make my case and be kind of an aggregate. And I figure that you're a grown adult and can figure out for yourself what reality is, right? With that, guys, I'm going to get out of here because my wife really wants to go on a date tonight.
Yeah, you got 4 minutes to get ready.
I know. I said quarter of, and I'm never right on my my times. In any case, Ollie, your link's in the description, but go ahead and plug yourself real quick before we get out of here.
Yeah, no, it's just I'm everywhere in socials under Holly Midlife or Holly Midlife YT. I haven't been very active on my YouTube channel lately because I have been working like crazy and I've been either sleeping or working. But I do have a new video on the editing table right now. So check that out when it pops up, Holly Midlife on YouTube. I've been more active on Twitter lately, which has been kind of fun. Because I don't give a shit what people think about me. So
yeah, I don't either. That's why I always laugh every time I get tankies in or the rainbow crowd. They're my favorite. The alphabet rainbow crowd. They're my favorite because their beliefs are so absurd. And if they got their way, everyone would be gay, and the entire species would be eliminated overnight. So
yeah, no, the worst insult they have for me is the usual isms or that I'm an old bag and I should shut up. Like the worst insult was, oh, you're too old or something like that. I'm like, yeah, I'm almost 50. Of course I'm fucking old. Like, geez, you think I'm not self-aware about that?
My favorite troll is just to start saying, yeah, you guys are a bunch of Nazis because you believe in the same thing Nazis do.
Yeah.
And in that James Lindsay video, he actually addresses that briefly, but he doesn't really go into it, but I think it's in his book.
Yeah.
But CRT is exactly what the Nazis did in Germany.
Yeah,
so don't think any differently because it is 100%. It's just a different ethnic group they are going after.
Yeah,
so
that's my plug. So yeah, follow me on Twitter. Subscribe to my channel. There should be a new video coming up soon. And just wanted to say a special shout out to Anti-Commie because he's been talking about me in the chat.
He's been simping for you in the chat.
I heard. I don't know why. I'm an old bag.
Yeah, I mean you're a pretty nice looking lady for your age, Holly. I mean I'm not gonna. I didn't mean to play that outro there. Sorry, I accidentally put that. I didn't mean to. Yeah, I mean, you're a nice looking lady for your age. It's just, I don't know. I tend to go for younger women. Like my wife's 11 years younger than me, so
Well, you're younger than me too. So like
Yeah,
you're looking to breed, and this is shut down. This
yeah,
doesn't work
right,
anymore.
right. We already married anyways. How would I have found you? You're all the way up in Canadian. I can't do that.
Yes,
It's
true.
too cold.
It is. It's very cold today.
It's cold here. It's in the 20s. Well, right now I think it's in the 40s, but yeah.
Oh, how are you going to survive, you poor thing?
That's Fahrenheit, not Celsius. Come on. We don't do that weird international stuff.
I can read freedom units.
Yeah, you can read freedom units.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for staying with us. Appreciate you, Holly, very much. I'll talk to you briefly after the show, so don't go anywhere. And guys, I should be back over on the Justify the Memes Wednesday and here on AllMinusOne next Sunday at 3 p.m. for the Siesta stream. And until that time, hey guys, this has been AllMinusOne. My name is Bill, and I wish you all well. Peace out.